It's Thursday, December 21st, 2023. This is Ashton Ellett here with another installment of the Two-Party Georgia Oral History Project, sponsored by the Richard B. Russell Library for Political Research and Studies at the University of Georgia. I'm here today in Marietta, Georgia with Jim Langford for part 2 of his oral history interview. As a reminder, Jim is a proud graduate of the University of Georgia and the Harvard Business School. Jim co-founded and led product development and marketing at the Harbinger Corporation, an e-commerce and networking company. He was later principal at Langford and Associates. More recently, Jim has pursued an extensive career in the nonprofit sector, including stints as Georgia State Director at the Trust for Public Land, Project Manager for the Jekyll Island Revitalization Project, Million Mile Greenway, and the Shepherd Higher Education Consortium on Poverty. He is currently the president of the Kusawati Foundation, as well as president and executive director of the Georgia Prevention Project. 5 Georgia governors have appointed him to a host of boards and commissions, including the Georgia Humanities Council. Jim is also past president of the Society for Georgia Archaeology and the Georgia Council of Professional Archaeologists. Jim, it's been, I went back and looked, it's been about 2 years since we last sat down for part 1 of the interview. But ever since COVID, time doesn't matter. It's a flat circle,
sure,
so it all runs together. So remind us who you are, and remind us who the Langford family
Well,
was.
I grew up in Calhoun, Georgia, northwest of here, a little ways, halfway between Chattanooga and Atlanta. And in those days, there was no I-75, so US 41 was the only way to get up and down the road between these cities. Small farming community that also had textile operations. Carpet industry grew up in Dalton and Rome and Cartersville nearby. So, and Calhoun was sort of the stepchild of those other bigger towns in that area. My family was from out in the country. My great grandfather was the country doctor in Redbud, and he had actually grown up or was born over in the south part of Pickens County in North Cherokee County, and then moved over to Gordon County in the early 1900s. Mm-hmm. And so my grandfather, that was my great-grandfather. My grandfather then was one of 6 or 7 children. He was the oldest one, became the president of the local bank, was the clerk of court in that area at that time. Very funny, I also have his certificate to practice law that he signed himself because he was clerk of court. Back in those days, you read for the law, and then the judge said it was okay, then you got to practice law. And so, but it had to be signed by the clerk of court. So he signed his own certificate. I have it downstairs. I'll be glad to show it to you. It's a fascinating document. But he was quite a character. And then my father was a character, even more interesting. Elected official, never lost an election. I had multiple positions, including state representative and state senator, 4 terms in the House, 4 terms in the Senate. Kind of reversed. He said he graduated when he went from the Senate to the House. He said that was a step up for him. But that's another story. He was quite a colorful guy.
Oh, yeah.
My mother was a very active participant in the community. She was from the Midwest. She grew up in Ponca City, Oklahoma. And she and my father met in Chickasha, Oklahoma, and he was there during the war. And so she came to Northwest Georgia with this great Midwestern ethic and of work hard and do lots of good public service work. And that's what she did for many years. The last 30 years, 40 years of her life, she only slept 3 hours a night and slept on the couch during those times. And she was high energy. We were the only people that I knew that had 2 actual telephone lines in the house. One phone was over there, one phone was over there. Sometimes you put them together and, it was just a wacky time. Phone was ringing from 7 o'clock in the morning until midnight every day. And so I had to escape some of that. But the ethic of public service was very strong in that family, and with my mother and father both. My mother helped create parks. She taught swimming lessons for 30 years and created big swimming programs, teaching thousands of kids to swim, low income from that community, kind of lower Appalachian area, Appalachian foothills. And they still talk about that, the people that and they have a swimming complex up there named for her, by the way.
Oh, that's great.
It's kind of fun. So out of all of that, I forgot how we got to where we are, except that my father became one of Jimmy Carter's early supporters, strategy people in the 1966 campaign, we spent a lot of time with them as family. Then my sister married Jimmy's oldest son, Jack, during Jimmy's first year in office in 1971, when he was elected governor finally in 71. And so then we all went out on the campaign trails like we'd always done, and we began to do that with the presidential campaign. And so that's kind of where I left off. I was one of the first 4 or 5 people hired in the campaign as a field coordinator. I had 4 states that I was in charge of: Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, and supposed to run all that out of Jackson, Mississippi. So I got in the car the first week of August of 1975 to go to Jackson, Mississippi. And that was also the same week that my nephew Jason was born, who was Jimmy Carter's grandson, and my sister Judy and Jack's son, first grandchild in both sides of the family. But and I took off to go work in the campaign. Rode to Mississippi with Frank Moore. Now, Frank was later in the White House, head of government relations and congressional relations and those kind of things. Wonderful guy, colorful guy. And we headed off to Jackson, Mississippi, driving. And I remember Frank singing every 15 minutes or so. He'd start singing "Going to Jackson," and so he just thought that was great, And so I'd never been to Jackson, and so it was going to be an episode for me. We stayed overnight in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, crossed the state line into Mississippi sometime in the morning of the next morning, and as we did, just after we got inside the state line, saw a helicopter come over fairly low over this expressway, and it's out in the middle of nowhere. And I wondered, what is that all about? And the helicopter went back and forth. That's kind of strange. And Frank and I began to talk about people we were going to see when we got to Jackson, because there's a point in bringing up the helicopter. And I said, well, there's a guy that I met at the Democratic Convention in '72. I was a delegate to the convention. That convention, I may have already talked about that. And so this guy's name was Danny Keyes. Danny was young. He was maybe a year or 2 older than me, but I'd met him at that convention. And I said, we got to go see him. He's active. I'd stayed in touch with him. He's active in politics in Mississippi. He's running for something right now. And Mississippi was one of those states that has odd election year. And they were running. They had their campaigns in '75 instead of on the even years like we do in Georgia.
Right.
And most states do. And so they had a governor's election going on. They had between William Winter and several other candidates, including Cliff Finch, who ended up winning that election. And so we knew we were lining up people we were going to go talk to. And William Waller was the governor at the time, Bill Waller. I said, well, we'll see Danny Keyes. And Frank said, yeah, and we got 2 or 3 other people we got to go see. And here's kind of a list of people we need to see while we're there. And we'll need to see this guy over in Arkansas as well. And I said, okay, great. And so we get to Jackson, drive up in front of the state capitol, plenty of parking for some reason. Not like the state capitol in Atlanta. No. And jumped out of the car and started walking up the steps, and there's this guy, Jim Johnson. Well, he's the guy that we were going to go meet in Arkansas. And here he is on the steps of the state capitol in Mississippi. 3 or 4 weird things happened in this period that were just strange. Pre-cell phone days, you had to find a pay phone if you really wanted to contact somebody, especially if you were on the road. It was very difficult.
Yeah.
So here was this guy, just there on the street, on the Capitol, the steps of the Capitol in Mississippi, and he was from Arkansas. Well, that's the guy we needed to see. So, all right, so we had this conversation. We're going to see him later in the night. We get up to the Capitol. All right, let's go straight to the governor's office. Okay, so we go to the governor's office, and there's this nice woman who's the governor's secretary, and he's very kind of proper and had these glasses. And Frank said, we represent Jimmy Carter, Governor Jimmy Carter, former governor of Georgia. We want to see Governor Waller. And she said, okay, well, what are your names? And he said, I'm Frank Moore. I said, I'm Jim Langford. And so she took her glasses. She said, Mr. Langford, what town in Georgia are you from? And I said, well, I'm from Calhoun, Georgia. She put her glasses down, got up and walked over and went, okay, so your father is Beverly and your uncle is Charles. And I went, that's right. She said, I went to high school with your uncle.
You're like, this is either really good or really bad.
You got to be kidding me. She's from Calhoun, Georgia. I mean, that was just so bizarre.
Right.
And she was a relative, actually, of Lewis Massey.
Okay, yeah.
Whose family was also from Calhoun, his mother's family. And so I went, you got to be kidding. And her last name had been Lewis. You got to be kidding me. Okay. For the next 6 months, anytime I needed anything from the governor of Mississippi, I got in. I got in to see him. I got whatever I needed from
Can't
from her.
beat that network.
No, it was great. But these are the kind of just weird coincidence things that happened over that period. So we went and saw the governor, and we checked on several other people and did some other things, and it was a fascinating time. Another funny thing happened the same day or 24 hours later. I said, well, we need to find William Winter. We need to find somebody with William Winter's campaign. He was the guy who'd been lieutenant governor, was running for governor. Wonderful man in Mississippi. Later did win the governorship, but it was a few years later. And so, we need to find that. Okay, so we're at a gas station. I go in to pay the gas. I think it was the day of the election, actually. Well, I got to come back and tell you about the helicopter story too. But so I go into the gas station, and here's a guy paying for his gas. You know, you had to go into the station in those days.
Right. I mean, that's every millennial's
You
worst
didn't pay
nightmare.
at the pump, right? You had to go inside, even if it was a credit card.
I just decide I don't need gas if it tells me to go inside and pay.
And so here's a guy in there, a young guy, and he's probably I was 22, and this guy was probably 25 or 6.
Okay.
And he's paying for his gas, and he's talking to the guy, and he's giving the guy a card, and he said, "Okay, well, you know," and trying to give him a brochure, and it said William Winter campaign. I went, "That's great." Well, this guy's name was Wilson Golden. And he was head of the William Winter campaign. I went, "That's the guy I need to see." I mean, these kind of weird connections.
He's out pressing the flesh at the gas station.
Wilson and I have been friends ever since. He just retired to Georgia in the past 3 or 4 years. Great guy living up near Gainesville. But we've stayed in touch and have been good friends ever since. So those are the other weird and this sad coincidence that happened. And it happened when we got to the governor's office, and Betty Jean Lewis, who was the secretary, said, "Well, we're a little distraught today." And I said, "Really? Why is that?" "Well, there was a plane crash last night, and it included my friend, Danny Keys, who was running for office, and he was on this plane with a man named Doxy Fisher, who was state treasurer or running for state treasurer. He was a well-known figure in Mississippi, and he might have been running. He was running for some office that year, and they were on a plane together that had crashed, and they were looking for it with that helicopter.
That was the helicopter.
That was the helicopter. Somewhere out there near Marietta in that eastern part of Mississippi. It was just very tragic, but these weird little things like this were happening, and I guess all political campaigns have weird coincidences.
Sure.
But it was just one of those times, and so and it kind of went on from there. So when Frank Moore left me in Mississippi, he left me with 3 phone numbers of other people I needed to talk to in Mississippi. Oh yeah, and here's a couple of phone numbers in Louisiana. Here's a phone number 2 phone numbers in Arkansas. One of them is a young lawyer named Bill Clinton, and then another phone number in Alabama. 2 of them. That's it.
That's a big time campaign you got there.
Go make it happen, and whatever it is. But we got to focus on Mississippi.
Yeah.
Because Mississippi, this was the first year of caucuses.
Yep.
Presidential caucuses. And Iowa was lined up first. Nobody knew where Iowa was in the political scene until that year.
That's right.
And so this was the Iowa caucuses. Were on January 19th. And then 4 days later was going to be the Mississippi caucuses, just right behind that. And of course, that was when George Wallace was the leading candidate in the South. Some people thought the only candidate from the South, running for president. And he'd already made a big splash, 4 years before that. So here he was running again. Well, of course, he was a big candidate in Mississippi. Mississippi in those days had two Democratic parties. And that had been split since 1964 and 60, and then of course
the Freedom Democratic,
Democrats,
establishment,
exactly.
white establishment,
exactly.
I should say.
And that challenge had been led by a woman named Pat Darien, and she became, of course, a big figure later in our campaign too. Pat Darien and also Harding Carter, who was the head of the editor of the newspaper in Greenville, Mississippi, and so our goal was we had to go out and figure out a way to win those campaigns, win that campaign. Somehow, it was a caucus system. Nobody had ever done that before. We didn't know what that was all about. I mean, there were a lot of things that were new. And that's really part of the reason Jimmy Carter was able to win.
Right.
Was because he and a lot of good staff people, Hamilton Jordan and Jody Powell and several other people, Tim Kraft, and a lot of these folks, young people who were smart, who got in there and figured out the rules early on. The funding rules were different. There were maximums that you could give and those kinds of things. There were qualification levels.
Right, because this is right after the Sunshine, the Buckley v. Vallejo, and all those.
Absolutely, and after all the crazy Nixon stuff.
Yeah.
And so all these great reforms
Yeah.
were in place. And that's great, but nobody had figured out how all that worked.
Right.
And so the Jimmy Carter campaign, I mean, they have figured it out. These guys figured out the rules and began to figure out this checkerboard system and dominoes. Okay, New Hampshire wasn't number one anymore. Mm-hmm. Iowa was going to be number one. Now, it was a caucus system, but you could still make headlines out of it. That's what we thought, and it's still true. You can make headlines out of Iowa. Okay, if you make headlines out of Iowa, you got to make headlines out of Mississippi too. It's going to come right behind that, but you got to beat the Wallace people in Mississippi. Mm-hmm. Tough road.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So those were the two things. Then New Hampshire would come 2 or 3 weeks later.
Which is the one that most people focus on today with
course.
The Peanut Brigade and trekking through the snow and
Oh, yeah.
freezing your butt off. And
Oh yeah, my mother had worked in all that, and my sister did
right.
too. And that's great. But and yes, Jimmy Carter proving himself in New Hampshire, in New England,
mm-hmm.
that was a big deal, winning that primary. But here we were in Mississippi, trying to figure out, okay, got to find a way to beat Wallace. We got to find a way to get an edge on Wallace. Prove that Jimmy Carter is the choice for Southerners, mm-hmm. is the Southern campaign, leader in some way. Wallace is not, and so you had to figure out a way to beat him in that campaign. Well, I could go on for hours about what happened in Mississippi, and I won't do that. But it was a fascinating time, and I learned a lot. And I learned every little back road of Mississippi. And I learned pretty quick that everything you've ever heard about Mississippi is true. All the bad stuff and all the good stuff. There's plenty of both.
Right.
Plenty of both. But it had been, remember, this is 1975. Well, gosh, this is just within 5, 6, 7 years, of Medgar Evers being killed and all these other terrible things. Mm-hmm. The Freedom Riders, mm-hmm. Over in Neshoba County and these terrible things that had happened. I mean, were murders. I mean, it was serious stuff, and you had to be really careful about what you were doing,
right,
and how you were doing it. Now, working for Jimmy Carter, a former, Southern governor, okay, that was kind of okay.
You were a white man who had grown up in the Deep South.
Exactly. So, okay, but I had to go work with lots of black folks in the Delta and a lot of other places. We had to be successful with them, too. And there were times when I gave some of them rides and would say, and everybody was a little nervous. Now, I wasn't as nervous as they were, but everybody, and I was a little slow to catch on to that I should be nervous, but it was tough. It was rough. And Pat Darien, who was terrific, she and Hottie Carter later married when they both worked in the White House. But Pat was, whoa, boy, what a character, red hair, blazing blue eyes, and she was, take no prisoners. Well, she is the one who'd created that party in Mississippi. And she said there were many days that they had to go. They looked in the cars, under the cars, before they cranked the cars in the morning, worried about bombs. Because it happened to a lot of people. And we've kind of forgotten about that, now. Thank goodness there are good writers who've written a lot of these things about that period in the Civil Rights period and written about Mississippi. But it was tough. It was scary times. But hey, I loved it. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed learning a new state, learning these new people. I got to be great friends with Hottie Carter. He was a wonderful guy. I'd been a journalism major at the University of Georgia. So I knew about that newspaper, Delta Democrat Times. His father won the Pulitzer Prize in the 1950s for his writings about Brown versus Board of Education. Mm-hmm. His father, on his 40th birthday in the 50s, made a $5 bet that he could swim the Mississippi River. Well, that distance,
long ways.
Even sideways was
like $50.
It's a mile or two across. When you get to Greenville, Mississippi, it's a wide river, mm-hmm. And so that was the bet. And of course, you got currents and logs and all kinds.
Start swimming that way.
And he did it. He was quite a character. And so Hotting, the younger Hotting, and he was a blazing great editorial writer. And the younger Hotting, who was running the newspaper when I got there, was terrific. Everybody loved him. He had young people, young journalists working for him that had come to work for him, who really were, some of them were or Johnny Apple. I mean, some of these people who were
Oh, yeah,
later
Johnny, yeah.
bigger names, the New York Times and
Yeah.
Boston Globe, and they got their start, working for Hotting.
I did not know that Apple got his start down there.
Well, Hotting took in all young journalists out of college. They were cheap, they were easy, and they were coming
Still
to work.
are.
They were still are, and he made good writers out of them. And I watched him in that room, when they were putting out the newspaper, and boy, he was in there typing as fast as he could go, and yelling instructions to people. It was old school journalism, and calling little meetings of everybody and putting out the paper. And it was fun to watch. And I went, that's the guy. I like that guy. and I forgot somebody had put him up as a vice presidential candidate at the 72 convention, at the 1972 convention. He had.
If it was going to happen at any convention, I believe
Exactly.
1972.
That was
I believe it would be
wide open
1972
He had given the nomination speech for Terry Sanford
of North Carolina.
In that convention, and Terry Sanford was thought of as the new face of the South.
One of the many iterations of the New South.
Exactly. So there's the guy. So and Hotting Carter was sort of one of his minions or sponsors, younger guys putting him up. And so then somebody turned around and nominated Hotting for vice president at that same convention. Well, who is that guy? And
there's a reason why the George McGovern didn't accept the nomination till 3:30 in the morning.
2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. We had challenges to the delegation. I mean, I may have told that.
Yeah,
story
I think we talked about that a couple years ago.
I was the one reading out the votes on the microphone because I was secretary of the delegation. And so I was the one tallying all the votes and doing all that stuff. And so at the last minute, I changed my vote only after Jimmy Carter took me down to talk to Hubert Humphrey's wife because they needed my vote on something. I had voted for Humphrey. Humphrey dropped out. I said, I'm going to vote for him anyway.
Young principled man.
Yeah,
that you were.
Well, I was, hey, I didn't like the whole McGovern thing going on in the party because
so more the scene, the
it was a whole scene,
sort
it
of
was a
thing.
whole
Okay.
PR scene, and it was so dramatic in terms of who he was and why he was running and the whole anti-war thing and all that. Okay, that's great, but something in me, and maybe I heard this from the other, that I realized he wasn't going to win a popular vote across the country with that kind
Boy,
of
were they right.
they're right. And I knew Georgians weren't going to vote for him.
And they didn't.
I was only 18 or 19, but I could figure that out pretty fast. And so, and I was supposed to be representing my 7th congressional district up in Northwest Georgia.
Right.
Well, I couldn't say that I went and voted for McGovern. Now, Humphrey, okay, brilliant guy. And I had learned when I was on Capitol Hill this previous summer, man, that guy was a real doer. I mean, he got lots of stuff done. I heard this, he introduced a piece of legislation every single day.
Oh, yeah.
And he was in the Senate. I mean, for years. He did that. He was just that kind of worker.
Well, if you know Rogers Wade, Rogers does this really good impression of Hubert Humphrey. He said he moved so fast. He talked like a machine. It sounded like a machine gun because he would just every sentence would roll into the next sentence, and he was just a dynamo of activity.
Absolutely.
And he was friends with everybody. He was friends with Talmadge, which is just, you think 20 years before.
I was impressed with him being a doer. They got stuff done. He wasn't just a talker. He was famous for being a talker.
Yeah.
But he was also famous for being a doer.
Right.
He wrote the first nuclear test ban treaty. He wrote all these, some of the first things to help with intercity legislation. Lots of different things.
Yeah.
So I wanted to vote for that guy. Well, Jimmy Carter had done a seconding speech for Scoop Jackson.
That's right.
For
Washington. Yeah.
And I was going, well, okay, pretty milquetoast, middle of the road kind of guy, conservative Democrat probably, most people would say. But I went, I'm going to stick with my guns and vote for Humphrey. Well, I got the votes all together. Well, we were one vote short of the delegation for Jackson. And so Charlie Curbo was the head of the delegation. And he looked at the votes, and I looked at the votes, and he said, I think you need to sit in here and talk to the governor, talk to Jimmy Carter. Jimmy was sitting there, and he said, you need to talk to him about your vote. And Jimmy's sitting there and said, he can vote for anybody he wants to vote for. I like that. Okay. And so he wasn't going to pressure me to do anything. That wasn't his style on something like that. And so he sat there for a minute, and so we're waiting for the roll calls are going around the states, and tallying them. And so I had the tally sheets, and Jimmy said, "Let's go. You want to talk to Humphrey about it?" Yeah, okay. Let's go. He got picked up. We went down the aisle. I had the vote tally, so they couldn't call out the votes back on the microphone until I got back.
Right.
They had to keep passing. And so we went down front and to find him. And he was sitting he had been sitting in this area of the stands off the floor, and went down there. Well, there was his wife. There was Muriel Humphrey. And so he wasn't there. So, but she talked to me for a minute. She gave me one of his pens, and we talked for a few minutes. And I went back. I didn't say a word. I just changed the vote.
Sold your vote for a lapel pin.
I still got that pin around here somewhere. And so
I'd hope.
I did. It was the HHH for the little pins. But I went back and changed my vote. Jimmy kind of shrugged. Nobody made a big deal out of it after that. So that was great. Anyway, I got off point here. But the thing in Mississippi was a terrific educational moment too. It was working. I had to work all these big counties, get in there and work with all these precinct people, anybody who was interested in the campaign. I remember in a caucus system, it's all about who you can get to that caucus.
Right.
It's going to be in some gymnasium. It's going to be, at somebody's office. It's going to be in a city hall.
It's not a 10-minute affair. It's not a go in, push the button.
No, and it's complicated. And you got to get them to show up, and then there are all these instructions on what they do when they show up, and
round one of voting, round
and
two
nobody
of
done
voting.
Nobody done it before.
Yeah.
And in this one, they were going to have both caucuses, both the black caucus group and the white caucus group parties in the same locations doing voting at the same time.
Were there
They'd never done that before.
security concerns about that happening? Or?
Nobody talked about that.
Probably.
Nobody talked
nobody
about
said
that.
it.
But it was clearly a moment where everybody was a little nervous. How's this going to happen?
Yeah.
How's this going to work out? Well, in communities where there weren't many black folks, those white folks would dominate. Other communities, maybe the black folks would dominate in those caucuses. It just depends. We didn't know how it's going to shake out.
So where were you on caucus? Was it day, night?
Caucus night. We were in Jackson, but then Hamilton Jordan came and a couple of other staff people from Atlanta came. We put a whole bunch of new young staff people in there the last 30 days of the campaign. Jimmy'd been in and out of the state. I'd done advance work for him, all kinds of other things. We didn't have Secret Service until December of that year. And so we had to do everything ourselves. But we put a bunch of young people. We brought in about 5 or 6 or 7 younger staff people. Some of them I'm still friends with from around the country. Last 30 days, go out and really kind of do this caucus thing, really work these communities in particular. So I was in Jackson for those caucuses. And then that night, it was all by telephone. People were calling in saying, "Here's the results." And it came in, well, Wallace won, because they got more people in more communities. There were black communities in the Delta and other places that where we did win. Sergeant Shriver was also one of the, and Tom Houck, who Tom Houck was running Sergeant Shriver's campaign in Mississippi at the same time I was running Jimmy Carter's campaign. In Mississippi.
Yeah.
So I got to know Tom, in those days, and he would call up, he'd call up and harass me about something. And so anyway, but Shriver was there in those days. Fred Harris was still running. It was from Oklahoma. Oklahoma primary was a week or two later. And it was also a caucus system in those days. And it was all before.
76, man, that was a big field.
It was a big field.
That was a huge field.
Birch By was running. Udall, Scoop Jackson, Jerry Brown.
Oh, yeah.
Jerry Brown.
Moonbeam.
Moonbeam. I mean, it was wild. Frank Church was running.
From Idaho.
Idaho. It was a lot of Western candidates. Frank Church, Udall, Jerry Brown, Scoop Jackson was still in at that time. See all these Western guys.
Fred Harris. You can
Fred
count
Harris.
Fred Harris.
Fred was in Oklahoma. We beat him. We beat Fred in Oklahoma 2 weeks later, and then he was out.
Yeah,
we beat him in his home state.
Yeah.
So
not a good look.
I went to Oklahoma right after Mississippi.
Okay.
And so we'll move on to that. I mean, that was the night of the caucuses. We realized what was going to happen. We got all the 7 or 8 young people in the room, and Hamilton said, "Okay, you go to Oklahoma. You go to Oklahoma. You go here." I mean, he was telling everybody where to go next.
When was Florida? Because Florida was really important
March
for
the 9th.
getting Wallace out of the race.
That was the big moment too.
So you went to Oklahoma.
So we went to Oklahoma first.
Okay, and then
we won in Oklahoma. Another caucus system. Drove back to Atlanta. Then I went to, did I go to Florida right after that? I think I went to Florida right after that. And so got to Florida, and then I had a big congressional district north of Tampa that I was in charge of.
Okay.
And so it was Newport Richey all the way up to Hernando, Florida.
So was that the Big Bend part of the state?
It was below the Big Bend.
It was below Big Bend, okay.
It was Tampa city limits and north.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So
most of it was
area.
Tampa city limit. Okay.
High growth area in there in Tampa. It was crazy. They were having a new congressional district every 2 years in there. I mean, it was growing like crazy.
Some things haven't changed.
Some things haven't changed. Growing like crazy. Okay. So and that's another story. But that was how things began to do. We began to leapfrog staff, take young staff people that were experienced, some of them right out of college, had a couple of years, some time on the campaign. Boom, take them and send them to another state and another state and another state and do that. And that's how I ended up in Florida, and that was where Phil Wise was running the campaign down there. They became head of staff at Carter Center and chief of staff from Plains. And so Phil was great, was running that part of the campaign down there in Florida. And so Florida was a big deal. That's where we beat Wallace. That was the big showdown. And so we beat Wallace, at that moment.
Well, those are three very different states.
Very, very different.
Very different states.
Right.
There's our buddy.
Yeah.
How would you describe the differences between your field work, your advanced work in Mississippi, Oklahoma, and Florida? Because, those are three very distinct constituencies.
That's right.
Distinct Democratic parties.
That's right. And different systems. I mean, the first two were caucus. Okay, then the minute that New Hampshire hit, then it became more of a media type campaign.
Right.
And so it became general election where you actually went in and cast a ballot.
Right.
And Florida was one of those. Okay. So, we knew once we won New Hampshire, then boy, okay. All right. Now we were really getting big media.
Right.
We were getting media coverage. Jimmy Carter was on, Meet the Press, finally. Wow. Right before, like 2 weeks before the Florida,
Huntley Brinkley.
Those kind of things were happening. And so he was getting this attention finally, getting some name recognition that was, outside of the South. And so, that was, the New Hampshire thing was a complete surprise. Jimmy Carter, this guy from Georgia, won the New Hampshire primary. Wow. Against all those other characters who were from other parts of the country.
Right.
That was a big deal. People started to pay attention. And so that gave us that momentum then that we needed when we got to Florida. And so Florida, that was a crazy time, and that's when a lot of interesting characters started. That's when Hunter Thompson showed up for the first time.
Oh yeah.
Now he had showed up in Georgia in May of '74, and that's when he wrote about in the campaign. He wrote the Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, 1976. An endorsement with fear and loathing is what he called it in the Rolling Stone.
Because he had covered 72. 72 was the first Fear and Loathing.
Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, 1972, and then he did this article in Rolling Stone in '75 that came out. I've got a copy in here somewhere of an original. But he showed up at the campaign. He had been at the governor's mansion in '74. He followed Ted Kennedy to Georgia,
right,
for the Law Day speech at the University of Georgia.
That's right.
Okay. And so that's what he writes about in this article that is hilarious. I mean, great writer. And so he writes this article about that and about that moment and how he came down to the governor's office, the governor's mansion, and blah, blah, blah. And he goes over there to Athens, and he's got his tape recorder, and he's running out to the car, in typical Hunter fashion. You don't know how much of this is true and how much is not, but most of it was true. He didn't exaggerate a lot. He didn't have to exaggerate much. But he kept going out to the car and taking wild turkey and putting it in his iced tea glass and going back into the luncheon at the University of Georgia.
I'm sure he wasn't the only one. So.
But Jimmy Carter was not the featured speaker. Ted Kennedy was supposed to be the featured speaker.
That's right.
But Jimmy Carter got up in front of all of these judges and lawyers and the legal community of Georgia, and got up and then started to begin this chastising the legal community for their participation in a lot of things that had happened that were wrong about civil rights in the South, going way back to the to post-Civil War days. Wow, I mean, you could have heard a pin drop in the room. Well, Hunter Thompson had a tape recorder going, and as he describes it, he said, I couldn't believe what I was hearing, coming out of this guy. And I didn't even know who this guy was. He said, but in the face of all of these guys, here he is kind of chastising them and their whole profession. And so Hunter had that on tape. Well, then when he launched into the campaign in 1975 and 6, he would take that tape recording with him and play it for anybody who would even make people sit down and listen to this tape. And did that many times. And so here he was, showed up at the camp at the thing in the night before, 2 nights before the election results in Florida. We won that election, and boom, I mean, truly, then we were truly certified nationally.
Yeah.
Won this thing in New Hampshire, won in Iowa. Okay, who is this fluke candidate? Beat Wallace in Georgia, in the South, in Florida. Okay, wait a minute. This guy's got national appeal and has got a campaign that's on fire. And then we took off from there. And I then went to North Carolina, ran part of the North Carolina campaign. The eastern part of the state, I went to Virginia.
Okay.
The Panhandle in Virginia.
Okay.
So, and then went from there to Alabama, back to Alabama.
Ooh.
And so by then we're up to, April, May, the end of, about the middle of April. Of April. 1st of April, I was in Alabama. I think the primary in Alabama was around the first week in May. But
Where were you? Were you based out of Birmingham?
Birmingham and Huntsville, and so we were traveling those streets. And we already had some other people in Alabama who'd been there since I'd been.
Did any of the Wallace people come on board after that, or did the campaign stay kind of?
Yeah, a few, and there was always a core of people in Alabama who were looking for an alternative to George Wallace anyway. Sure. So here they were, and here we were. I'll tell you one funny Alabama story that was an anecdote. Now, this was in Alabama on the first trip I helped Jimmy Carter with, and this was September of 1975. So Jimmy was going to a trip. I was living in Jackson.
Right.
I was supposed to go over and meet him in Alabama to help him with his trip to Huntsville and Montgomery.
Okay.
Okay, and we were going to drive between those.
Yeah, that's a long drive.
Okay, it's a long drive. All right. So I get over there, and they said, okay, and I remember who I was talking to at the staff in Atlanta, but they said, okay, we're going to do this thing. He's supposed to do this event with the, what they call an editorial board meeting with the newspaper in Birmingham.
Okay.
And so, and that's going to be in the morning, like 9 o'clock. So we got some time to fill earlier in that morning. So what I want you to do is take him around. We'll do breakfast. You should do breakfast at University of Alabama, Birmingham. Okay, and go into the dining hall in there, and just grab some students, and get them to come over and have breakfast with him. That's a good way to kind of fill in the time.
Okay.
And he can talk to them, and maybe you get some good new campaign help out of that, and you never know where that's going to lead. Okay, great. Take him in there, sit him down, have breakfast. I start going around and grabbing these students. Well, it's 7:30, 8 o'clock.
Oh.
We've had a prayer breakfast before that. But anyway, it was 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and I'm trying to grab these students. And I said, hey, they got the governor of Georgia over here, former governor of Georgia, and he's running for president. And how about you come over and, you can have breakfast with him over there? And they'd go, nah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
They kind of move on.
As a former college student who didn't like getting up at 7:30, yeah.
And they comment, no, not really. I think I may have gotten 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Maybe 5 at the most. But I must have asked 20 people. And
probably thought they were getting extra credit for it.
Exactly. So that didn't work out. Okay, but it was okay. The second thing that happened that morning, it just shows you a little bit about his personality too, which was kind of interesting. And he was treating me like any other staff member, and he was hard on staff people.
Yeah, I think that's something that's sort of forgotten.
He was tough on staff people.
Yeah.
He was playing Admiral Rickover. That was his mentor. And Rickover was famous for being really tough. And Jimmy ran his peanut operation that way. He ran staff people that way. He softened up a lot as the years went along. But early on, he was still pretty tough.
Well, the something of a micromanager.
Oh, yeah. But he wanted things to be done right. He had an idea about how they should be run right as a technician,
Yeah.
Okay. And so we get into the elevator going up to the editorial board meeting. And he said, do you have the materials to hand to the editorial board people? About who I'm in, I went. I said, nobody told me about that. Meaning, nobody had from the Atlanta office. I was only one of 5 or 6 people on the road. There wasn't but Hamilton and Jordan and Frank Moore. That was it. There weren't any real other staff people around, and Lord knows.
Yeah.
They just said, here, go take care of him. And I said, they didn't tell me about that. He got this real cold look and said, so you asked them and they didn't tell you. And I went,
no, that's not what I know.
You know, and I'm 22 and I'm going, oh, man.
Sweating bullets.
I'm sweating big time. Okay, so somehow he said, okay. So he goes on to the editorial board meeting. He comes out of there an hour and a half later, and he's all smiling and happy, and so things were better. So we get later in the afternoon, though, something else happened. And I was nervous from what had happened in the morning. We get to Montgomery, and we're doing anything we can to get on TV, whatever it took. You know, if you get on TV or got on radio, anything like that, great. So we went to the TV station. Somebody knew somebody at the TV station. Okay, there was a guy there who'd been like a weatherman in Atlanta years before, and here he was in 1975, and he was doing a kids show in the afternoon, like a 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock cartoon type show, you know, like we used to have in Popeye Club in Atlanta and others, you know, around. And he's doing this thing and it's puppet stuff, and I went, okay, so we're going to put him on this show. Yeah, that's what's going to happen. They've agreed to do that. They've agreed to come on the puppet show. And I went, okay. So the guy pulls me aside before that and says, okay, listen, here's what we want the governor to do. You know, is we're going to ask him a few questions, and he can talk and say whatever he wants to. And then at the end of that, I'm going to ask him, I'm going to say, Governor, at the end of a long day of campaigning, what is it that you like to do? And I want him to say, I like to watch a cartoon. And I went, oh, man, you want me to ask him to say that? And I went, oh, man. And I was already burning from the morning. And I went, okay, you know, I'll just see how it goes. And so I went and I told him what they wanted. He smiled and went, okay, I'll do it. That was it. But I mean, it just showed his, you know, he wasn't a prima donna. I mean, He was willing to do whatever it took to make this campaign successful. And if it was, hey, I watch a cartoon, he was going to say, and he did it, and had a funky little smile when he did it.
It was his Nixon sock it to me,
you know,
moment.
I guess. But you know, the point is, he was a worker, and he knew that, you know, he expected you to work hard. The campaign did not pay for hotel expenses. I got paid $300 a month as a salary and gas expenses, but no hotel expenses. And his rationale was, if you can't find at least one person to pitch you up in a town where you're doing work, you're not doing your job. Okay, there's logic in that. But hey, when you're working and you're at 10 o'clock, 10:30 at night, and all of a sudden you got to find a place to go to bed, and you realize the only supporter that you know where you can sleep is about 40 miles away or 50 miles away, and it's late at night in the Mississippi Delta. You did it, but that's just the way it worked. And so that was fine. I mean, but it was. We didn't know any better. As young people, we didn't know any better. Running a presidential campaign, Hamilton Jordan had never run one before, neither did anybody else in that campaign. You went out there and you did it, and you worked hard at it, and you worked it from the ground up, and you worked details. And that's how we won. That's how we were successful. Of course, he was a good candidate too, and he said good things and made good press and all that kind of thing. So that was the moment. Now, there was one big moment for me in that spring. I was with him several other times in different states and different places. But there was one moment. We was back in Alabama again. This is in April of that year. And on Tuesday of that week, I've got the exact day, it might have been the 13th or 14th of that week, of that month, was the Pennsylvania primary. Mm-hmm. And everybody was looking at the Pennsylvania primary. And that was Hubert Humphrey. They were still talking about people coming in at the last minute, like Hubert Humphrey and other people. You know, Ted Kennedy, Hubert Humphrey, big names. You know, oh, can't be this Jimmy Carter guy. You know, he can't win. Can he really win? Who is that guy? It needs to be these bigger names. You know, well, Jimmy Carter won the Pennsylvania primary, and everybody went, whoa, okay, all right. All of a sudden, yeah, he's proven himself in all these other places. Now he's getting delegate counts. This starts to look like he's really in the race. That Thursday, or that Friday then, Jimmy came to Alabama to make a big speech. University of Alabama, Birmingham, or one of the other universities.
Yeah.
Birmingham Southern, maybe, I think it's right. And so I had to ride with him in the car. And that afternoon, just that afternoon, Hubert Humphrey made a public statement that I'm not going to run. Everybody then went, that's it. Jimmy Carter's going to win this election. And I got in the car with him that afternoon, late that afternoon. It was early evening, and we were going over to Birmingham Southern. And it was just a whole different vibe, And I said, wow, I heard the Humphrey thing. I heard the Humphrey announcement this afternoon. He went, this little smile. I went, yeah. I said, this is it, And so it was just a whole different vibe. I mean, you could feel it in the room. We then walked up those steps to Birmingham Southern. They had speakers outside. They had a jammed room, auditorium. For some reason, they put speakers outside of there, and you could hear this guy in there warming up the crowd, and it was a big crowd. It was lively. And we were walking up those steps, and still that weird feeling. And he got this weird aspect about him. He went in there and got up to give his speech, and I'd heard him give that same speech, 50 times, 100 times. He got up to give that speech, and he froze. I mean, he froze. He started his speech. He froze for a couple of minutes. He was tearing up. You could feel it. You could just absolutely feel it. The room was electric, and it was just, he'd been introduced and just said, you could feel it. And somehow he got it together and did his speech. But that was it. That was the moment. That in that car and in that thing, that's when I went, that's it. We're going to win. We're going to win this election and win this race. So, and that really was. And then I went on and ran the campaign in Nevada and Las Vegas, and that's a wild, funny story too.
And I'm not.
We haven't covered much territory here.
Well, no. I mean, this is great because these are stories that we don't often get to hear about, especially the Carter campaign.
Right. Right.
So Las Vegas. Why would they send somebody whose experience is in the South?
Yeah, well,
Virginia, which was a competitive state.
Successful stuff, and we're all younger people, but we'd proven ourselves. I went and camped outside Hamilton's office.
Maybe they just didn't want to send married people out to Las Vegas.
This is funny. This was after Alabama primary was over. It was the end of April, and it was the first week in May. That's about when it was, end of April. And I said, okay, I got to go. I don't know where I'm supposed to go next. Yeah. So me and one or two other young people, we'd go camp outside Hamilton's office until he, for hours, until he had a chance to talk to us. Brought me in, he said, okay, all right, you need to go to Nevada. Okay. Like when? Well, today. Okay. Go to Nevada. We've got a guy there who's been doing some things, but, we've got the former governor helping us there, the former Chief Justice of the Nevada Supreme Court. They will meet you at the airport, blah, 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 and you go run the Nevada campaign. After Nevada, the way that the schedule works out, you'll then go to California, and you run part of California. And I went, okay. And so other people were going to, and at that point, you were focused on California, Ohio, New Jersey. Those were the big three the first week of June. And you had a couple of other primaries in between in there, and Nevada was one of those. So Nevada was kind of a warm-up for the California one a couple of weeks after that. Okay, I got on a plane. I didn't have a hang-up bag. I had some kind of little bag, suitcase. I didn't have a hang-up bag. So I had like 10 or 15 things on coat hangers getting on the airplane, like shirts and things, And I just, I didn't have security back in those days either. So I go running onto the plane, almost late, hang up my clothes in a closet and jump on the plane. And I'm in Nevada, next thing I know. and I get there and I get off the plane, hot as hell, and a dry heat. And here are these two guys waiting on me. And it's the former governor and the former Chief Justice of the Nevada Supreme Court. They're both one of them's wearing a brown leisure suit, and the other's wearing a baby blue leisure suit with white shoes and white belt.
This checks out.
I went, okay, well, I mean, I was a 70s kind of guy with kind of wild hair, but I thought that the governor and the former, I went, well, okay, well, they're just different in the West, I guess. And they're different in Las Vegas. And we got into a gold Cadillac and drove downtown. And so, and they were in the biggest law firm in Las Vegas.
Okay.
Big entertainment law firm. They had 20 gold Cadillacs. 20 gold Cadillacs that belonged to these guys running that law firm. And so and I'm getting off the airplane and hear all the slot machines going off and all that stuff. And the minute I landed,
you're not in Calhoun, Georgia
no,
anymore.
Man, it's 7:00. It's dark by that time. It's 7:00 at night, and they said, "Okay, well, we'll just drive you down the strip here." Well, I'm going down the strip. Well, this is 1975, 6. Well, all the big stuff hadn't been, but Caesar's Palace was there, and MGM Grand had been built, and it was the brand new one.
So you had so the old ones, you had Sands, Tropicana.
They were all still there.
there.
Tropicana, Sands, Desert Inn, all those were there, and the ones downtown, the Horseshoe,
the Golden Nugget.
Golden Nugget, those were downtown. Yeah. Okay, so MGM Grand was the new one, and so we're driving downtown. They're going to take me to my little cheap hotel, whatever it was. They were going to put me. I was finally going to get a hotel room, and so that they were going to pay for, and. Well, we're going to go in this MGM. I want you to see this, what a real casino looks like. Okay, great. Oh, my God. I mean, I'd never seen anything like that.
Right.
And, people didn't go to Las Vegas like they do now. And I went, wow, I don't know what this is all. This is crazy. This is some wild time. And so then the next, and it was a fun time, and we got a lot done in Las Vegas. But they took me down then the next morning, and we had a big meeting, campaign meeting. And those guys were there. Another staff guy that had been kind of running things in Nevada before I got there.
Uh-huh.
I walked in the door and said, "Okay, guys, here's what we got to do." And I don't know how, I guess it was a moment where I kind of realized what I had learned over a year's time. Because I walked in and they said, "Okay, what do we need to do?" I said, "Okay, here's what you need to do. We need a phone bank. We need 10 telephones. We need 2 that are 8 of them are on the bank, and 2 of them are office-type phones that we're using for other stuff. Okay, and then you got all these volunteers lined up. Great, and we're going to get them on phone banks. And this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to qualify them. And this is some of the stuff we've done in Florida.
Yeah.
These are the cards, how we're going to qualify them, leads, and blah, 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 and people are going to call back and do all that stuff. We got to do that. But let me tell you something. I don't know how I knew all this. I said, the phone companies are not going to set up those phones until they get deposits up front for political campaigns. And they're a lot. They're like $300 a line, or which we thought was a lot of money in those days. $300 a line, $500 a line, because they want to be sure they get paid, and they want to be sure so they want those deposits in advance. They're going to get the deposits in advance, so we got to go raise the money. It's going to be like $1,500 or $2,000. We got to go raise it somehow. I thought that was a lot of money back in those days. Because I was coming out of campaigns where it was hard to raise money. $1,500, got to raise that money really fast, $2,000. Then they won't even schedule putting in the phones until after we do that. So that's going to take another week or two, something like that. I mean, so guys, we got a lot of, but we got to get to work on it. Former governor and the former chief, they were both, Grant Sawyer was the former governor's name, and John Collins was the other guy. And they were taking notes. I went, great, had a great meeting. Boom. Okay, guys, I'll see you down at the campaign headquarters, and we'll see what happens next. I wasn't expecting anything to happen. We had the phones installed that afternoon by 5 o'clock. And that's when I realized, whoa, man.
They might know some people.
Wow. I mean, and that's when I realized the campaign was in a whole different gear, too.
Right.
Because we didn't, man, if I'd tried to do that in Mississippi, it might have been 2 months before we could get this one. But I'm sincere about getting the money and getting the moment. But you're right. They knew some people. They got on the phone. They made it happen. They got the money. They got the phones installed. Everything was ready to go. The next day, they're running phone banks, within 24 hours.
So this is Vegas. So, in Democratic politics in Vegas,
Right.
Clark County is the name of the game.
There are 2 counties.
Washoe.
And Washoe County.
Yeah.
Reno and Clark County. That's it.
Yeah.
95% of the vote.
So did you go up to Reno at all?
Reno one time. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And I sent another guy up there named Scott Burnett, who's still a good friend.
There's just not as many votes to squeeze out of Washoe as there is Clark.
And Mark, and he was terrific. He was great. Scott Burnett. He rolled into town. So we had 2 or 3 other young guys who showed up who were going to help me, and then Scott Burnett showed up, and so we had some meetings. And and by that time they're going to give me a car.
Hey now.
They're going to loan me a car from the law firm. And
a gold Cadillac?
And I said, well, what kind of cars you got? Well, you got these guys. I said, I don't know about a gold Cadillac. Okay, well, this other guy who worked at the firm said, well, I got this old what's called an F-85, old Oldsmobile F-85, 3-speed on the column.
Oh, my gosh.
You know, that's what we want right there. So we got that car.
You didn't want to get your picture taken behind a gold Cadillac?
We had that car, and we were peeling wheels in around the corner. You know, and so we realized we were peeling the wheels around the corners and having fun. You know, we'd work like hell till about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. Then we'd go out and hit the casinos and we'd go to all the cheap casinos. And then, okay, it was.
Well, that's how you ate, was the buffets.
Well, that's right, the cheap buffets, $5 buffets, right? Because they wanted to get you in there to gamble. And so, and they were good breakfast too, you know. And so the guys, I said, well, yeah, hey, we got to peel. You could do anything. You could get away with anything in Las Vegas, they said, except, you know, public drunkenness or something, you know. But you could get away with any traffic things. Forget it. They weren't going to arrest you for anything. We weren't doing anything bad. We were these 2 or 3 guys, but we said, okay, well, we love playing with that 3-speed on the column and kind of peel some wheels when we go around the corner and let the clutch out. Well, let's get some extra air in the tires, you know, because it'll make it peel more. So we're putting extra air in the tires, you know, and wow, this is great, you know, blah, 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 blah. So I call up my sister, my younger sister, Lucy, and she had become really good friends with Hunter Thompson by then, and they stayed very close friends. She has written up in his book, he had a list, one of his books, where he had the Fear and Loathing Honor Roll.
Uh-huh.
Fear and Loathing in America Honor Roll. She's on the list, along with some other very interesting people.
Huh.
But she was a character, still is. She lives in Athens, by the way. But she and Hunter got to be good buddies. But she said, I called her on the phone. I told her what we were doing. She was in some other state working on the campaign. But she might have been in New Hampshire or back in Massachusetts somewhere. And she said, and I told her about the air in the tires, and she went, oh, you haven't read Hunter's book. I said, which Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas? No, I haven't read it. She said, oh, you got to read the book. That's what they're doing in the book. They're putting air in the tires, you know, this Cadillac and peeling wheels around. I said, okay, so I got to go read the book. And it really is a fabulous book, great writing. But anyway, that was a fun time. And my second day on that campaign, my first day, right after we did the breakfast meeting, they said, okay, you're going to go make a speech today at lunch. Okay. Where'd I go? Tropicana Hotel. Okay. Is that a big hotel? Yeah, that's a big one. Okay. Okay, good. I get down there, and it was packed. It was a big ballroom full of people and a big lunch thing, and they had 2 or 3 other representatives of other candidates that were there.
Oh, okay.
You know, that kind of thing. And so I got up, and I started kind of doing my usual kind of campaign thing and talking about Jimmy Carter and his background and blah, 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 and told a few little Southern anecdotes, whatever they were, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, we went on from there. And somebody pulled me over and said, no, you don't, that's not the way you do a campaign speech in this state. I said,
okay.
Really? What is that? No, you got to talk about hard issues. And I went, okay, well, I can do that. You know, if that's what you think we should do. Yeah. It's got a cutting edge on these issues. Okay.
Uh-huh.
All right, great. Then we went on from there. But anyway, a lot of other fun things happened. We did not win in Nevada. We had Frank Church from Idaho running in that election, in Morris Udall, right there in Arizona in the backyard. Jerry Brown, Scoop Jackson, all of those were running, and Jimmy Carter. Yeah. And those all were Western states, all next to Nevada. That was hard. I think Jerry Brown won that primary. And there weren't many electoral, for crying out loud, there weren't 3 electoral votes in Nevada.
The labor union vote in Clark County was probably.
But your electoral votes are based on how many senators and congressmen you have. They only had 1 congressman and 2 senators. So there were only 3 electoral votes in the whole state. So it really didn't make much difference. We were trying to get some publicity out of it, but hey, okay. Nobody was really expecting a lot. I think we came in 3rd, but Jerry Brown won. So then we went on to California from that. But it was quite a fun. It was a fun experience, and a lot of other anecdotes. Oh, Scott Burnett. Scott Burnett said, okay, well, I'm going to go up to Reno and run the campaign in Reno. I said, great idea. You know, I've got my hands full down in Clark County. He said, besides that, I don't know about these casinos down here. Scott was from Nebraska. He said, Omaha, I think. He said, I don't know about these casinos down here. They look a little too fancy to me. I need a place where you got to nudge a drunk and kick a dog or 2 to get out in the door, you know. I said, that's what I'm looking for. He said, I think I can find that up in Reno. I said, go for it. you do do that. He's a great guy. He's a hilarious guy. He's later in the White House. But anyway, so that was kind of the fun. That was a fun moment in the campaign. Also hard. Oh, one other funny anecdote with Jimmy Carter on that trip. He came to Nevada about the second week I was there, second or third week I'd been there. He showed up. We meet him at the airport. He gets in the car with the two, governor and the guys again, John Collins and Grant Sawyer. Gets in the car with them, and I rode in a different car. We get to the hotel, and he's going to be staying at the Hilton, at this really nice Hilton. They had a suite, a really nice suite where he's going to stay overnight. Well, we get in there to the suite, and I looked up and went, oh, shit, it's got mirrors all over the ceiling. Like
it was the 70s.
Like you would expect in a hotel. I'm sure it's
Las
still like
Vegas
that in
in
Las
the
Vegas.
70s.
Come on, it's probably still worse.
You
You probably got a hot tub in there.
I assure you, I have no idea.
I haven't been in one of those in a long time. And so we were laughing about that, and the bed was on some platform. And I said, he said, well, I'm going to see your mother this week. I'm going to see your mother tomorrow in Ohio or some other state because she was traveling with Rosalind. And I said, great. And I had just gotten a haircut that morning in the same Hilton hotel, and my hair was still kind of 70s. I had kind of wild hair, and so I said, so tell her I got a haircut because she'd been asking about that. He looked at me and went, well, did you? As the father of three boys, I can see why he said that. I went, yeah, I did, but he was whether he was poking at me or what.
I'm sure a little bit.
He was a little bit having fun. But he did say something that really was the first time he'd given me a compliment, and he didn't give them very often.
Yeah.
But he said, well, I rode with those two guys, the former governor and those guys. They said you've done a great job. And I said, well, great, thank you. I appreciate that. And that to me was worth gold.
A sideways compliment that other people had complimented you, and he was just relaying the message.
Well, but he was.
But that was his way.
Of
passing a compliment.
Along, and so I thought that was just fine.
Take the win.
I'll take it 100% all day long. But anyway, that was a great time, and then of course went on to California.
What part of California did you have?
We had Northern California. Now there, north of San Francisco. Now
oh wow,
they had a pretty intensive organization already there.
Okay.
Working.
So you didn't have to go set up phone lines.
Exactly.
Okay.
In fact, they didn't quite know what to do with me, and so they said, "Okay, you're kind of family, since you're
more or less.
Okay, we'll promote you as a family member." Okay. Well, what do you want me to do? Well, we want you to go to all these little radio stations and TV stations all the way from Sausalito north, all the way to Redding and Red Bluff and Chico and all the way up.
Did you go over into the valley?
Not much. Sacramento, it was about as far as I got over to the valley. So it was really the northern coast.
Okay, yeah.
So that meant Napa, Mendocino.
The state of Franklin?
Yeah, it was Sausalito, and what's the little town there that's the arm wrestling capital of the world? It's on the coast right there. I'll think of it. Right there near, anyway, it's north of Sausalito.
Yeah.
On the coast.
San Rafael and all those.
All those, and then all the way up to Mendocino, all the way, and I did Red Bluff, Redding, Chico. Those are kind of in the valley. Those are in the valley. And then Eureka. That's right. I went all the way up to Eureka, which was fascinating. I got to see some parts of California that were just spectacular places, and a lot of them rural up through there.
Petaluma.
Petaluma. I was on the radio in Petaluma. So I hit all these radio stations. I did radio interviews, whatever it took, all little talk show, morning talk shows.
So you switched from more of a campaign operative to a surrogate.
Yeah, exactly. To a like a little campaign tool, instead of a real organizer.
Yeah.
My job wasn't organizing. It was all media. It was a media campaign besides that. So, okay, go in there, talk to the supporters that you got. That's fine. Touch base with them, but then do these morning shows. Do morning shows on radio or whatever they'll let you do.
Drive time radio.
Whatever they'll let you do. Just go in there and do it. And we got local people there who'll help set that up. And that was fun. And I got way up on into saw some fun parts of Mendocino. I saw some else. There were some very revealing moments too. I got to Mendocino. Mendocino's a tiny little town on the coast, hanging on the edge of a cliff. Might have had 2,000 people, very small. And there was a Catholic priest that was supposed to be helping us out there, and I was going to be sleeping at the church or somewhere, one of the places that the church was going to put me up in there. And that night we were going to go down and have some drinks with some folks at this bar, and so we get down there, and the priest was a funny guy, fun guy, and he said, well, we got all these communes up here in this area now. This is 76. So the communes had started happening in the late 60s.
Sure. And
so you got some unusual people. Some of them have had a lot of money, but they've gone to, live in these communes. And so a couple of those people are going to be there at this little bar. And then some other folks from nearby. I said, okay, that's great. And so we get to the bar and we sit down. We had this nice dressed guy and his girlfriend or wife, and we're talking, and they're probably in their 30s or early 40s. And they said, well, what are you doing here? I said, well, I'm working on this presidential campaign, for Jimmy Carter and blah, 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 and this campaign. And they said, okay, well, when's the election? I said, well, it's in about 2 weeks. Okay. And then they said, well, who's the president now? I went, oh, man. Now, there's a question I haven't had during the whole, and I was getting, I had gotten kind of.
They just missed the whole Watergate thing.
I had gotten really tired in the campaign at this point of, having these canned responses to the questions.
Sure.
Who was
You're
Jimmy
sort
Carter?
of autopilot. Yeah.
Autopilot. Who's Jimmy Carter? What was he running all about? What was the campaign pitch? I had all these pitches about who he won the campaign. Well, who's the president now? And I went, wow, these people are living in the car. I said, well, it's a man named Gerald Ford.
Y'all ever heard of Grand Rapids, Michigan?
Isn't that crazy? And these were well-dressed people. And I went, wow, they really have just dropped out completely on purpose.
Yeah.
On purpose. And so anyway, that was a fun part of the campaign. And so, and I had another odd Georgia moment up there, history moment that you'll appreciate. I needed a day off. I was tired. And so I said, okay. I talked to my father on the phone. He said, well, go take half a day and just ride around, just do something you want to do. Okay. So I looked on the map. I had old paper maps. And I was up near Sacramento, close to Sacramento, and getting up in the Sierra Nevadas. And I looked, and there's a little dot on the map called Cherokee. I went, well, what's that being called Cherokee for way up here in Northern California?
Can't Google it. You got to go.
I got to go. So I drive up there. I get up there. Here's an old store that's closed down, an old house, nobody around, another little fallen down little rock building with a historical marker. Okay, I'll go read that. Read the historical marker and realize this town of Cherokee was founded by 2 Cherokee Indians from North Georgia, who first went to Colorado after the gold was found in Dahlonega in North Georgia. They went and founded the town of Aurora in Colorado. They're the ones who named it that. And then they went and founded this little town because they found gold there. This was right after the gold rush in Northern California in the 1850s. And founded this town, and they called it Cherokee. At one time, the town had 17 saloons and 12 hotels. President Taft visited the place in 1910 or somewhere. The story goes on and on and on, and I'm just going, you got to be kidding me. I found this little place in the middle of nowhere.
So now it's just a mining ghost town?
Now it's not even a ghost town. It's just nothing is there. Just 2 little things, 2 buildings. That was it. And then this marker said, and they found diamonds here. And I went, I thought the diamonds were only found in Arkansas. In the United States. They had found diamonds there. And the guys who were the first investors there in the diamond thing then went to South Africa and founded the De Beers Mining Corporation. And De Beers sent rocks back for this monument.
What?
You got to be kidding me. I just could not believe this whole story. And so now there's a whole network of mines under the town. Everything's gone. And Ronald Reagan had put up that marker when he was governor. How about that?
I had no idea.
And I had no idea either. You can go look it up. It's still there. Okay, you can still look up that Cherokee. And so that was a highlight for me. Finding some weird historical artifact of a town.
That's wild.
And the little rock building still had a metal door on it. That had been the assay office where they stored the gold that they were assaying that people were getting out of the mines in that place.
Did you go in there and sweep around the corners?
Oh, I'm sure I could find something. But it was quite an adventure. So that was fun. All right, California campaign. Oh, now all the other fun things that were in California at the time. Of course, the whole gay scene in California was coming on very strongly in that period, and I saw all of that in terms of the bars and all that was new. I mean, it was just something different and new that we were not accustomed to, certainly in Georgia. And the country was not really used to at that point either, but there it was, and it was quite open, and that's terrific. And I think the head of the campaign in California at the time was gay.
Oh.
And so it was, it was just part of the scene. It was just part of what was going on in California. And I was still seeing the late, the Haight-Ashbury district was still going strong, and all the other things that came out of the hippie movements from the late 60s were all still going on in San Francisco. And I'm glad I got to see all of that, before it all kind of changed.
Yeah.
Before it all became gentrified. Of course, now it's got all kind of issues now.
It's a city in flux.
It's a city in flux. Okay, so then came the end. That was then the end of all the campaigns. All ended on the same day. California primary, Ohio primary, New Jersey primary were all on the same day. First week of June, I think it was June 5th or 6th. And so I was going to fly out on that day, back to Atlanta. And on the same day, on the same evening, my mother was going to arrive at the Atlanta airport. My sister and Jack Carter were going to arrive from Ohio. Or anyway, one of those, they were coming from different, all of us were coming into Atlanta at the same moment and arrive at almost the same time. And we were going to get into a car together. And then we did. And it was, again, no internet, no
it's
cell
meeting
phones.
At the Champs-Elysees.
That's right. Okay, and we're all supposed to, we're all going to meet at the hotel. I don't know how we figured it out, by phone. Okay, we're all going to ride together in the car, and we're going to ride to Calhoun, Georgia. All right. So we get off the plane. We gather everybody together. We're in the baggage claim, and my mother, character that she was always trying to take care of folks too. Help out no matter what it was, no matter how small a detail of helping somebody out. She was going to do it. And so she's down there, and we're in the baggage claim, an old baggage claim in Old Hartsfield.
Okay.
Had one of those belts where it comes out of the wall. And then it runs along the side, and you're supposed to grab your bag, and then it goes back in again. And it goes back around again. It's a big circular belt, right?
Yeah.
And so bags are coming in and out and going in and out. And so we gathered our bags. And there's some woman over there who's standing next to the belt. And my mother's talking to her, and the woman's going, yeah, I've never flown before. And I came from so and so and so and so. And then she'd go, oh, there's my bag. There's my bag. And then she
wouldn't just walk up and grab it?
She didn't know what she was supposed to do. And so my mother was saying, well, what? She said, and then my mother was still talking to her. Oh, there goes my bag again. There goes my bag again. This woman's never figured out. She's never been to an airport. She didn't know you're supposed to just take the bag off the belt. And so my mother said, hey, let me help you out.
Yeah.
Let me help you out. So we get her bags, all this thing. Well, the woman didn't have a ride. And here we had come off of, months of just, hard work, campaign work. And my mother said, we're going to give this woman a ride to wherever she's going. And we piled her in that car, this big car, with her bag on her lap and all of our bags and all of us. And I think Jack was, I don't remember who was driving. It was me or Jack. And we were, 11 o'clock, midnight. We're driving around down in Fayetteville, Georgia, somewhere trying to deliver this to somebody's house.
Drive her off Peachtree City.
Somewhere like that.
Just to turn around and go
all
the
way back and then drive it again. But that was just, part of some of those details of what you do.
I guess you didn't argue with your mom.
Well, but also, it was part of that ethic of a campaign is, and I remembered this too. I mentioned this on Facebook in the past couple of weeks when Rosalind Carter died. Rosalind and I traveled with my mother and Rosalind in Mississippi.
Yeah.
A couple of times. And Rosalind was tough too. She was tough like Jimmy in the campaign. And my mother had taught her a lot of things about campaigning, but Rosalind, and so she got there and I said, well, this Wallace crowd's really hard, and we're having a really hard time here. And so we went on and on. And at the end of and she said, well, you just have to keep going. Keep going. It's okay.
Yeah.
And so she said, we'll just keep going. but it'll work out. You're overestimating what's going on, the problems with this Wallace crowd. Okay, at the end of the 3 days, I put them out at the airport in Memphis, and we'd gone from Mobile to Memphis, and so for 3 days, and so I put them out at the hotel at the airport, and at the sidewalk at the airport in Memphis, Rosalind said, "Okay, I was wrong. You were right. This is a lot harder than we thought it was going to be in Mississippi with this Wallace crowd." And she said, "But let me tell you something, that Jimmy has always said." She said, "If you're going to win these people, you've got to love them. You got to love them to win them." And I remembered that. And it's true. No matter what you're doing, if you really go in a difficult moment with people, find a reason or a way to love those people, and they will know that. And that's the way that you establish this connection with them, and that's how you win them over. And so I guess that was part of my mother's ethic too, with this poor woman who didn't know her back. We weren't even campaigning, weren't even trying to get her vote. But just having that connection and that understanding that here was somebody in trouble who needed some help, whatever it was, and you just help them out. So anyway, but that was the end of the campaign, and then we went on from there, of course, into the convention and all those other things.
Now, did you work in the general election too, or
worked some in the general election?
I guess the convention, obviously, you had been in 72. What was how did 76 compare to 72?
Well, 76 was a whole different deal. Here we were, in the insiders kind of there. Yeah. Hamilton asked me to come and be his assistant during the campaign, Hamilton Jordan, during the convention, because he said, "Well, you've been to a convention before, so
sure.
come work with me." And so I did. So we set up we were in a suite together. He had one room off the suite. I had another room. We had a working room in between. And so I was helping him with a lot of those pieces on the convention. And it was going in and figuring out how it was going to set up and how it was going to work and what was the communications and between everybody and, all those pieces. Again, no cell phones, no internet. I mean, it's a lot of word of mouth. There's a lot of stuff going on there.
Two-way radios and all that.
A few, but not much of that. And so there were some phones. I think there were phones on the floor, maybe.
Yeah, there would have been on little
posts,
posts.
I think.
Yeah.
And some of that kind of work, but it was very difficult. But some odd things happened at that convention, some funny things and some odd things. A funny moment with our friend David Dunning as well. But that was also the bicentennial. Remember, that was 76, so it was the bicentennial.
And this was New York City.
New York City.
Yeah.
Well, I got there by going to, I went to Hilton Head, South Carolina, to see a bunch of my friends and kind of party atmosphere about the 2nd or 3rd of July. And I got in the car, and I was going to drive up the coast to Washington, D.C.,
Okay.
get on a train in Washington, and get to the convention that way. That was that was my plan. Okay.
It's a good plan.
Okay, good plan. So I'm going through South Carolina, and I leave at midnight or something, after partying down there in Hilton Head. Hilton Head was nothing back then. It was a 2-lane road still, but anyway, fun place. So I get up to the south of the border in South Carolina where all those fireworks were. And I said, well, it's a bicycle. I need to buy a bunch of fireworks.
Oh my God.
So I load up the trunk of the car with fireworks, and I'm in an old car at that time. It was my grandmother's old car. And so I'm driving to Washington, D.C. It was a girl I was dating a little bit. I stopped there to visit with her, William and Mary, somewhere in that area. Went on to Washington, D.C., get up there, had lunch with David Dunning on K Street.
Yep.
And David was working in K Street, and we were having lunch. It was about 3:00 in the afternoon, so nobody was in this restaurant. And we got in there, and oh gosh, it was right after the whole Wayne Hayes thing had happened with the tidal pool, and what was that woman's name? Oh no,
it was
Mills.
Wilbur Mills.
Wilbur Mills.
Fannie Fox.
Fannie Fox. That was the tidal basin thing. Wayne, the other guy, who don't say?
You said Wayne Hayes.
Wayne Hayes.
Yeah.
He had a secretary who was famously blind who said, "Hey, I don't even know how to type. I'm just on staff because blah, blah, blah." Her name was, I'll think of it in a minute.
Right.
Well, she was having her 15 minutes of fame right then. Okay. We go in the restaurant, and there she is. She's sitting in the corner in the same restaurant. And it was this was at the height of her 15 minutes. And so David and I were sitting there, and we were the only other, folks in the restaurant. I know you're looking up her name.
I am.
I'll think of her name here in a second. But
Elizabeth Ray.
Elizabeth Ray.
Elizabeth Ray.
So David's facing me, and he can see over my shoulder, and he just stopped and said, "That's Elizabeth Ray sitting over there in the corner in this restaurant." And we were the only people in the restaurant. We were eating, and she was over in the corner. And I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." And she's over there. So I kind of turned around and looked. She's got these sunglasses on. She's trying to be incognito because everybody was after her, all over town. And that whole thing was a big deal back in those days. It was big headline. All right.
Probably should have eaten lunch in Cathedral Heights and not K Street.
I said, "All right, I'm gonna take the train to New York. I'm not gonna drive. I'm gonna take the train."
Okay.
And so David, I got to park this thing somewhere. I got to, my keys and let me out. Okay, and he lets me out of the Union Station. And then I said, "Oh, don't park in the sun. The whole trunk's full of fireworks."
Blow up your grandma's car.
Anyway, so that's how so I roll into Penn Station, in New York, again with clothes on hangers. I just still didn't have a hang-up bag, and some other.
They sell those at stores.
I didn't know. I was a 23-year-old kid at that point, and so we're all going to Washington. So and I get my hotel assignment where it is, and then I get to move to that thing with Hamilton. And so then I'm helping out with a lot of different pieces of the campaign, and a lot of other funny kind of wild things happened, including another thing with Hunter Thompson, and all kinds of wild things. One of the most interesting and stressful moments for me at that convention was when they said one day, this was third night of convention, I think, second night. They said, "Okay, listen, Daddy King is here with Coretta and all Coretta's children. Okay, you need to help them.
Okay,
you go with them, and get them settled, get them into the arena. Get them in Madison Square Garden. Just take care of them. Just whatever they need. You just stick with them." Okay, I can handle that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're at the hotel. We're gathered in the car. Coretta really was uncomfortable. She was uncomfortable because there were all these little kids that were with her. Okay, I mean, Dexter and all of them were, Marty. I mean, they were young. They were under 12 years old, little kids. And Daddy King was, Daddy King, and so here's Daddy King by himself. All these little kids. Coretta with her assistant, who was this very tough, kind of efficient woman. And Coretta just looked like she did not want to be with Daddy King. She didn't want to be with these kids. She wanted to be somewhere else by herself. Well, here I'm supposed to manage all this crap. And I said, okay, well, let's, we get into these two different cars. They did have some limousines. And we get over there and we start to get out of the cars at Madison Square Garden. And I said, okay, let me get your passes out now. And they went, "What passes?" And I went, whoa. Your credentials,
Yeah.
Yeah. And the woman who was in Coretta's gets real huffy, She didn't want to talk about it. And the other woman said, "Well, we don't know what you're talking about." I said, "Oh my gosh. You mean you don't have any passes or credentials to get in?" And Daddy King is just totally oblivious. The kids are running around. Marty King's got a camera. They're just starting to, and I went, whoa. What am I supposed to do? So I start to tell a policeman, we get up to the gate, I'm starting to say, "This is the King family. I got to get these people inside." I mean, I started playing that game at that point. I didn't know what else to do. And this guy, "Well, we have to have credentials for all these people." Well, I thought, man, I don't know. The woman who was the efficient woman really didn't want to have to use credentials. That was the bottom line. She opens up her purse and says, "Oh, you mean these?" Well, this had been going on for 15 minutes. And she had a big stack of credentials. And I went, "Oh, okay, well, there's one. Okay, all right, let's give them all the credentials. All right, now, where are we going to go? Where are we going to go?" And Coretta says, "Well, I am going to sit in the seat that Jackie Kennedy sat in last night." And I went, okay, I don't know how to handle that either. And what do I do about Daddy King? And what do I do about all these children? And so then the woman, the assistant said, yes, and if she's not sitting in that seat, we're calling a news conference right away. And I went, whoa, man, boy, this is a job I didn't sign up for. Okay, I don't know what and Daddy King's getting antsy. Where are we going? What are we going to do next? Where am I supposed to go? And the kids are starting to get scattered, and I'm starting to lose it, and I'm going, holy shit. I mean, what am I to do now? I'm sorry, my language. And so, and we're in the concourse inside the Madison Square Garden, and I see Bob Lipschutz walking by. Well, Bob Lipschutz, he was the lawyer for the campaign. He was later White House counsel.
He's somebody higher ranking than you.
Let me tell you, if Bob Lipschutz can't fix it, nobody can fix it. Okay, and I'm in that moment where it needs fixing, and I can't,
You got to pass this potato.
And I can't abandon this crowd to go fix it. I got to. Somebody's got. That was it right there. I said, Bob, come here. Here's the deal. Coretta wants to sit in the seat that Jackie Kennedy sat in last night. She's got her sister right here, Daddy King. I don't know what I'm going to do with him. What am I going to do with these kids? Blah, 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 blah. Bob said, okay, I'll take care of this part. I'll also figure out, found somebody else. I'll take care of the kids. You take Daddy King and take him down to the floor, to the delegation, to the Georgia delegation on the floor. I said, that's a great idea. Okay. So I did that, and I mean, talk about dodging bullets. And Marty King's taking pictures. He's 12 years old, and he's taking a lot of pictures and doing his thing, and the kids are running around, and they're, okay. Then I have to get them back in the car, get them back, okay, and they do everything goes on. We get back and we go to Jimmy Carter's suite.
Okay.
Where Jimmy is there at the convention. And we go up to the suite, and we're all up there in the suite, at least me and Daddy King and Coretta, and I don't know where the kids went to at that time. I don't think they were in the suite. And I was still decompressing after all the stress. I didn't know what else was going to happen. And Jimmy was going on, and Daddy King was being around, and Daddy King said, and this young man has been so helpful. I just want you to know that. And I went, I'm glad somebody appreciates the stress that I just went through. But it was an interesting historical moment, and I appreciate that part of it. But I keep wanting to see Bernice. That's the other daughter, who she recently just became a member of Downtown Atlanta Rotary, where I'm a member.
Right. Yeah.
And so I'm going to sit next to her one day at Rotary and tell her I met her when she was 10 or 12 years old, which was a long time ago. But it was that convention was high energy. It was more programmed than the 72 convention. 72 convention was truly, total chaos.
Yeah.
With McGovern giving his speech at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning as his acceptance speech. Okay, this one was better than that, a lot better. And Jimmy gave his acceptance speech at a reasonable hour, 11 o'clock or something like that at night, 10 or 11. And I remember who I was with and on the floor and, all those pieces. And Humphrey came and gave a speech as well. And, all that happened. And it was fun. And there were lots of fun parties and events and all kinds of goofy things that happened. So anyway, and another fun event with Hunter Thompson, where he was playing the tape, the famous 1974 tape from Law Day. He made people sit down and listen to it and do all these things, and he was acting crazy. He was in the bar, a hotel bar at the Sheraton, which the campaign was all hanging out there, and they put some kid from Rolling Stone with him that's kind of like an assistant, and Hunter, he talking these real low tones. He kind of talked like this. We could barely understand him. And these sunglasses on,
I'm sure the wild turkey didn't help.
And then he had that cigarette with a cigarette holder and that kind of thing going on. And so my sister was sitting somewhere nearby, my younger sister, and we were all laughing and talking. This young guy was sitting next to him with a coat and tie on. And he was at college. I don't know who he was. And Hunter said, hey, see this kid over here? I said, yeah, he's supposed to be helping me out, but he's a little uptight. We need to loosen him up. And so he took a can of lighter fluid, squirted it in his mouth, struck a match, and turned around and blew it on this poor kid.
What?
Blew this lighter fluid.
In the Sheraton Hotel?
In the bar, the Sheraton Hotel. It was a quick kind of burst of flame, kind of like a fire eater would do, fire, and this kid just leaped out of the chair and was just all on just kind of freaked out. And of course, Hunter never missed a beat. He didn't even smile. He just secret. I mean, that was just who Hunter was.
What on earth?
And so that was also David Kennedy was in that group. David Kennedy was Robert Kennedy's son, who later died of an overdose a few years later. But David was with us and was with my sister. And so Hunter said, okay, we're all going to go up to the room now, and we're going to listen to this tape. I want to play this tape for everybody again of Jimmy Carter in Athens. Okay, so Hunter's going to go up first. So he goes up first. We get up later. And so we open the door. Somebody opens the door, the hotel room door, and there's Hunter bent down over the thing you put your butt luggage on and TV on. And
Yeah.
And so he's down, bent over that thing, and he starts screaming, "Blue flame, shooting out of the wall!" Blah, blah, and he's yelling all this stuff. He'd been trying to plug in a tape recorder back there, and so he was over dramatizing what had happened with the shock coming out of the wall. And then he did something that I have learned from that night that I've used ever since. If you've got a cheap tape recorder, or even just your cell phone, and you need to amplify the sound, you take a trash can, a plastic trash can, or any kind of trash can that's in a hotel room. You put it up sideways, and you put your phone, or that's what he did. He put the tape recorder in the back of that trash can, and then it became like a speaker, like a loudspeaker.
Yep.
And so he was playing that tape for everybody of Jimmy Carter's speech. And then it went on from there. Everybody went across the street to the stage delicatessen and they were going to order food for Hunter, and he didn't show up. And he kept saying, yeah, you tell him this is how I want that food fixed, and I want a chop steak, but I'm going to take a real steak and then chop it up and then do this and do that, getting all these instructions. And then he was supposed to come over and eat it. Well, an hour would go by and he still wasn't there. Just chaos, normal kind of Hunter chaos that was going on. So I mean that was the fun, the fun part of the convention and all the things that happened after that. And so hey, I made it back to Washington D.C. I picked my car up again, rode the train back again, got my car, it hadn't blown up, and drove back to Georgia. So that was the summertime campaign. So that was quite an adventure during that period. But they didn't need field coordinators like I was for the primaries. They didn't need that in the general election. Media is what it was all about. And you were relying on the local campaign organizations, Democratic Party and others in those states to help out. So they didn't need me, and I took off. And I went off to Hilton Head to the beach during the last part of the campaign. And I just kind of disappeared. I was worn out. And, I mean, you do that
sounds exhausting.
You do that stuff 18 hours a day, even if you're young. You do it 18 hours a day, and you do that for a year.
Right.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, you have to maintain a certain composure.
I didn't know what burnout meant. I was young. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew I was tired, and I knew I wasn't. People start asking me a question, and I'd answer it in that kind of canned way, but
have that 1,000-mile
stare. And try to add some energy into it. It wasn't happening. And so I took off and went and lived with some guys over there and fished. I worked for the local newspaper over there, the Island Packet, and wrote stories for them, and then came out of that and got this job at Coca-Cola doing political work for Coke. And
so this would have been
76. That was after.
Was Earl?
With Earl Leonard. I started with Earl Leonard the first week of January of 77, and it was the week of Earl's 40th birthday. But I started there at Coke because of a man named Ovid Davis, who was
Earl's predecessor.
Earl's boss
Yep.
and predecessor. And Ovid had been on the University of Georgia journalism school advisory committee. And as a student, they put me on there because I was head of Sigma Delta Chi, one of the journalism thing, and I was kind of a leader in the journalism school as a student, so they put me on there too. And Tom Johnson was on there. And Tom Johnson had been in the Lyndon Johnson White House and all that stuff. And so Tom was, I don't know how old Tom was. I was, 21 or so. And so I was the one there was faculty problems going on between the dean and the faculty in the journalism school. And nobody wanted to talk about it, but it was going on. And so in these meetings have been going on all day. And finally, the afternoon meetings, they brought some faculty into the meeting. And we hadn't been talking about anything that was related to that, but it was clearly the elephant in the room. And I said, now the faculty's here, let's just get this issue on the table. Well, Tom Johnson, Mr. Buttoned-Up guy with the Lyndon Johnson administration, he froze. Ivan Davis, he perked up. He kind of perked up, and it ended up being a very good discussion. I mean, a lot of things got out on the table and went on. Well, after the meeting was over, Ivan Davis followed me outside and went on the sidewalk. And Ivan was a wonderful guy, but mush-mouthed, old South Georgia way of talking. Well, son, blah, 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 blah. He was talking fast and mush-mouthed. You come see me. If you ever need a job, you come see me. Well, 3 years later, I told my father, I said, well, I need to have a real job. Now, I can get a job in Washington with the White House folks, but I think I should go do some other thing. I'm kind of tired with all the campaign stuff, and I'm burned out from all that and all that crowd, and I need to do something else.
Yeah.
My father said, well, hey, here's a legislative guy I know at Delta, and why don't you go see that guy? And I said, okay, I'll go see him. So I go over to Delta. It's old Delta, and I'm talking about old buildings, weren't in any of their new buildings. The waiting room I was sitting in, the chairs were old seats out of airlines with the ashtrays in the armrests.
Unironic seating.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? And the pictures on the walls were the cheap pictures of a plane flying, and that kind of stuff. Women were in there with old secretary.
So this is not 2023 leading market cap airline in the world. This is old Delta.
Old Delta. They were typewriters, manual typewriters, that kind of stuff.
They have Selectrics.
And linoleum floor. That's the way it was. And I went,
all right.
Wow. But Delta was very successful, as an airline. And I went, and they were very well.
I know where they cut their costs.
And so I went into, and had a meeting with the guy, I forgot his name now. And he said, yeah, we could probably use you. Okay, first 2 years, this is the way we do things at Delta. Your first 2 years, you'll be cleaning out airplanes. And I went, okay.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I'm going along with this. Okay, I'm listening. And the next year, you'll be running tickets. So you're actually running a paper ticket from this desk, to other desks, and you're running the tickets around because nothing was electronic. Okay, and then, we'll see where things go from there. Well, I'm thinking, okay, there's 3 years. And I came out of what? I came out of the White House stuff and all that. Okay, maybe. I'll go think about that. So then I said, well, hey, I'm going to call Ivan Davis. I'll just see what Ivan has to say. And I did. Yeah, son, come on down. Come see us. You come in this building. You come in this door, back door, old Plum Street building, blah, blah, blah. Okay. I do that. We'll meet you. Somebody sends you, we'll meet you at the elevator down there. Something. Okay. So I do that. Get in the elevator, little security desk there. Go up 3 floors to the 4th floor. Get off the elevator. Linoleum floor, but nice linoleum floor. And right next to Mr. Woodruff's office. Mm-hmm. And hear all the pictures with Mr. Woodruff and Eisenhower and all these other celebrities all the way down the hall, and that's it. And I went, well, this is a little different than Delta. And I go around the corner to Ivan's office and have this great conversation with him. And that's how I got my job with them. So I was doing political work for them in Washington every week.
So what did political work mean for Coca-Cola in the 70s?
Well, it meant showing up at committee meetings, on Capitol Hill and getting copies of things. But it also meant hosting people for lunch and dinner and, being a good host. And Coke was considered sort of the white hat lobbyists of the day. Don't really ask for much or anything. Whatever they ask for, they do it very quietly behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. Maintain good relations with the Senate staffs and the congressional staffs that are from Georgia.
Very close to Senator Talmadge.
Very close to Talmadge.
Agriculture Committee.
Absolutely. And
Finance.
Sam Nunn. Yeah. All that. And so very close with all the staff. And Earl was the guy working for Ivan doing that stuff. And Earl had been, you probably have already interviewed Earl, where he was Richard Russell's right-hand guy for years. Earl was the writer of the longest filibuster in the history of the U.S. Senate. Earl was dictating the pages, and they were running the pages out to the floor for Richard Russell to deliver the speech on the floor. And that's where it was all the stuff about chocolate chip cookie recipes and all that other stuff. But he had it woven into a meaningful text. that went on. Of course, it was a filibuster about civil rights legislation. But Earl was brilliant. Earl taught in the journalism school while he was going to law school at Georgia, and he was funny as hell. And he was just brilliantly funny, and he had all these scenario plots going on with staff people running emails. And they weren't email back then.
Right.
Paper mail of letters, memos to all those staff people and all the little subchapters of who was who and who was dating who or not, and all kinds of crazy stuff. Had nicknames for everybody.
Yes.
And all that stuff. And so he nicknamed me. It took him about 6 months to figure out a nickname for me. They sent me to a lot of things that he didn't want to go to. He sent me to meetings. And one of them was to the Southern Baptist Convention. Southern Baptist Convention, some sort of strategy committee of some weird kind, some sort of advisory committee. Okay, here I'm the 23-year-old, 24-year-old. They're going to send me over there. And Earl just thought that was hilarious, sending me over there. Yeah, you're a Baptist, weren't you, son? I said, yeah, I was. Okay, well, and I know when you were 7 years old, you were a sunbeam, right? Sunbeam is this thing they have for little bitty kids when you're in the Baptist church. And there's a little song, Jesus wants me for a sunbeam. And so that became my nickname.
Sunbeam.
That old folks from that era, including Keith Mason and others, still call me Sunbeam. Because that was Earl. He just thought that was hilarious to call me Sunbeam. And that's what he and I would call me Sunbeam all the time. And so that was funny. And so then there were and then I roomed with another guy who was at Coke in the PR department.
And the whole time you're saying this sure beats cleaning out a DC-9.
Yeah, man. And not only that, Coke back in those days flew everybody first class. Everybody first class. So here I'm 24 years old. I'm flying first class to Washington D.C. back and forth, and they said, well, because hey, we're a first class company, we want everybody to fly first class. They got rid of that policy a few years later.
Oh boy, I can't imagine why.
That policy later, I think, but it was great, and you did things first class. You stayed in a first class hotel. Stayed at the Madison Hotel in Washington, which was a very expensive hotel, and it was right up there off M Street. And it was a beautiful place.
Okay.
And it was right where M came to, right across. Anyway, M and I don't remember what the cross street was, 18th or something. Mm-hmm. Might have been 14th. Wasn't quite over the street.
I was going to say it was, yeah.
M and 12th, something up in there. and just where Massachusetts Avenue came.
Yep.
Right up next to it. And so, anyway, wonderful hotel. And so they would send me up there, and I was up there every week, and I was going picking up copies of things and one thing and another. Earl said, we're going to put you to the test today, son. It's because he'd come up there once in a while, And we were at something one night at some reception and said, we're going to test you out. And I said, really? Yeah. What? Okay. I want you to come to my room at 8:30 tomorrow morning. And I think his wife was staying with him. It was him on that trip, BB. Mm-hmm. And he said, and I want you to bring a copy. And I don't remember what it was, but it was something that I could only get from some staff person at the White House. And you bring that to me at my office, at my breakfast at 8:30 tomorrow morning. And I went, okay, I can pull that off. So I'm thinking, okay. Well, I did. called somebody at the White House. I had a White House pass, by the way.
Yeah.
And so that I'd gotten because of family reasons, but which is another funny story. The about what happened with that. But so I got this copy, whatever it was, showed up at his door at 8:30 at the Madison Hotel with a copy of it. I thought that was hilarious. So it was fun. They had fun with me.
So you're saying Earl hadn't really changed that much?
He hadn't changed at all, and I could tell. I saw him recently. His wife died this past year.
Yeah, BB passed away.
Died. And I went to the funeral. I took pictures with Earl. And Earl's not in great shape physically, but man, he's sharp. He's still sharp and funny.
Well, he's moved over to Lynbrook, so that's.
I think they had him in Florida. This was in.
He was at Ponte Vedra for
they
a
just
long
put him
time.
in Lynbrook.
He did, yeah.
Well, I just saw him at the other funeral of our other friend who was there. Who was Sam Nunn's assistant too for a long time. You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah. Just continue, and it'll come to me. Connell Stafford.
And so he was
a Coca-Cola man.
Coca-Cola too after me, and Connell was terrific, and so they called him Possum. That one I've heard. That was very funny.
And Gordon Giffen was Howdy Doody. So, yeah.
You heard all this. Well, I've still got my Earl Leonard file. It's about this thick of all the memos, the copies of all the crazy memos.
Are those in those boxes,
They're
or
not
are
in
we
those
going to hold on
boxes.
to those?
No, I'm still holding on to those. But there's some very brilliantly funny memos. And those were only a year's worth. Other people had,
Oh, yeah.
had drawers and drawers and drawers of that stuff that went on for a long time. And so, anyway, so I had my funny stack of those. And some of them are brilliantly funny. And I've pulled out and showed one or two of them to Earl in the past. They're just so wonderful. But anyway, that was a wonderful experience. And my roommate that year was Carlton Curtis.
Uh-huh.
Now, Carlton, it's funny, Carlton started dating Jan Busby, who was George Busby's daughter, because Jan was working at Coca-Cola as an intern. And they were doing this, they had this secret kind of dating thing going on, at least secret in the early days. And so I was dating a woman that I later married. And so we had double dates and that kind of thing. So Carlton and I were in the, we're living together over in Smyrna. And something else funny, there's some funny. Earl would pull all these crazy things. One of them was that I left that winter around Christmas to go snow skiing up in New England. And I called up one night when I was there. And I said, well, how are things going? So I don't know why I called Carlton. And he said, okay, but the governor's over here at our condo. I was like, oh, shit, really? He said, yeah, he's over here. And George was a funny guy. He was a jokester.
Big South Georgia.
Yeah, he loved joking around.
Yeah.
He had a great sense of humor. And so George said, I said, oh, gosh, don't let him in my room. My room's a total rag. He said, too late. I went, oh, gosh. Okay. So, we're laughing about it. 2 weeks later, Earl presents to me in front of these other people this proclamation from the governor's office, all framed in a gold frame, condemning my bedroom, signed by George Busby. And it went on and on about how he had personally inspected the premises and all these things that had happened. And it was a health hazard, and it just went on. And it was hilarious. I've got it framed around here somewhere.
Probably had Norman Underwood type it up.
Somebody typing it up back there. And I got it framed around here somewhere. But it is so funny. So that was Earl. I mean, Earl would pull that kind of stuff, to be behind it, somehow. But that was a lot of fun. And then I got to be assistant to the president of the company at Coke because I did a couple projects for him while I was working for Ivan and Earl. Oh, I got to tell you one other odd moment. One morning I was leaving the condo, and I always got to work. I was not an early riser because I was stayed up late out partying most of the night because I was single. And I'd go to work at 9 o'clock. I wouldn't go late, but I would get there before.
Yeah.
And so I was at the apartment, 8 o'clock, phone rings, and it's Ivan's secretary. And she was hilarious. And she said, the boss wants to talk to you. His Honor, that's what we called him. That was his nickname.
His Honor.
His Honor, like he was the judge. His Honor wants to talk to you. Okay. So His Honor gets on and says, baby. They also call me baby. Baby and Sunbeam. Sunbeam, where are you? I said, well, I don't know. Well, you get a bag packed. You're going to Washington. And you're going to Washington on the company plane. But you got to get down here quick. Okay. No. That's not what happened. No, I got to the office.
Okay.
I got to the office, and his secretary called and said, His Honor wants to talk to you. He puts him on the phone and says, baby, where are you? I said, I'm in the office. You go back home and you go pack a bag. Drive all the way back to Smyrna and pack a bag and come back here to my office and see me when you get back here. Okay. I'll tell you when you get here. Okay.
You can tell me right now.
No. So I go down, I go back to Smyrna, I pack a bag, I get back down there to his office. He takes me there. He shuts the door. He never shut his office door. And said, okay, son, here's what you're supposed to do. You need to take this file to Bob Lipschutz at the White House, the legal counsel at the White House. Okay. And I'm going to tell you what it is. Okay. This is the result of a 5-year study that we've done at Coca-Cola about all payments that we cannot account for around the world. Meaning it was under the I forgot the name of the act that had been passed about Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, right? And so we want to know, since the president is so close to Coca-Cola and Paul Austin, they're going to want to know, everybody's going to want to know, this may come out in the press somewhere.
Yeah.
In terms of what we've done. We've gone ahead and done this study. Out of 10 years of study of all of our bank accounts in 136 countries, we can find it's $1.2 million that we cannot account for. I said, that's a pretty small amount of money across 136 countries over that period of time, but okay. He said, yep, but okay, we just want to be sure. We want the president to know that we've done this. We just want him to know this in advance. And so that's why we're going to deliver this. We want to deliver this to Bob Lipschutz. Tell him this is coming from Paul Austin. And the company plane is out there waiting for you now to take you to Washington. Okay. And you're not supposed to, and don't tell anybody, it's no problem. I get out there to the plane. Well, the plane's running. They got one engine running. The other it's one of those Gulfstream planes, which were really fancy, And so I'm going, oh my God, I got the whole plane. And so I hit the first step, I get up in there, and here's they always try to put somebody on the plane if somebody was going just to cut down on some kind of fees. So here's some young tax accountant guy sitting there whose eyes looked big and went, is the plane waiting on you? I said, yeah. He said, okay.
He was wondering who was getting on that plane.
Who was getting on the plane. And it's me and this guy flying to Washington. And I can't tell him who I am or what I'm working on. It was hilarious. And so I get off the plane, I go do my job, I deliver it to Lipschutz, and then I go on and he said, oh, no. I said, well, you got something else to do in Washington, don't you? Well, yeah, I guess. I can find something to do. But that was a funny.
How'd you get back from Washington?
Well, I don't know. I flew back on another plane, I guess. The company plane wasn't going to fly me back right then. So I had to find another way to get home. But were some fun. There were some fun times, and I had a lot of fun with younger people that I was friends with, and White House people, and it was a young time. I don't know if you remember that, but Washington D.C. had become a stale city.
That's a very kind, yeah.
Up into that period with Nixon and the Ford days, and it would become kind of sleepy.
Yeah.
And so this young people with Hamilton Jordan was 28 or 9 years old, was chief of staff, 30 years old. So, all the top staff people were under the age of 40, working for Jimmy Carter. And so all of a sudden the town became kind of fun again. People were going out to dinner and doing things and going to fun places.
Because nothing said fun like Bob Haldeman.
John Mitchell.
now Margaret.
Martha, different.
Martha,
yeah. So that was hilarious time. So it was a fun time, and I got loads of stories. And Hubert Humphrey's last speech, I got to see that. They had a big dinner for him. He had cancer.
He got
and
real
I got
sick.
to go to that dinner where he made his kind of farewell speech, and saw a few things like that. They were kind of interesting.
How long were you at Coke for?
I was there 5 years. I got a 5-year pin.
You were there longer.
Well, I was there when I became assistant to the president of the company, and had my office next to the boardroom, and got to be, all of the top executives became kind of mentors to me then in different ways. And then I got to choose where I wanted to go, and got to go to South America. Went to Puerto Rico first, and then lived there and had all these little tiny islands that were my territory all the way down to Trinidad. And then I went to Argentina and was in Argentina.
When you say your territory, what did that mean?
There were little bottler companies on all these little islands, and my job was...
they were all still independent at that time.
They were all independent, and I was supposed to go in and work with them and help them out with marketing and check on their everything. What else do they need? Find out what their best practices, all those kind of things. I went from my office right next to the boardroom to all the way to the lowest guy on staff. I had 8 of the 10 smallest Coke markets in the world, including numbers 1 through 5. And so, I had the tiniest places. I had places where the only delivery truck they had was broken down and was sitting up on blocks. And all they had were returnable bottles. And so people would know, this is on the island of Montserrat.
Oh, yeah.
They were making Cokes on Mondays, Sprites on Tuesdays, Fanta on Wednesday, Coke again on Thursday. And people would bring their bottles in. So the delivery truck wasn't working for like
You're talking tens of people.
Oh, yeah. Well, they had, at Montserrat, I think the population was 60,000. Maybe it was 30,000.
On the whole? Yeah.
On the whole island? No, it was 13,000.
Yeah, I was...
13,000. Dominica had 70,000. These other islands had 30,000.
Yeah, so you're talking,
right,
half the size of Macon.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Well, and the marketing budget was $70.
$70
Yeah.
U.S.
Yes. And so we said, well, what are we going to spend the $70 on? And my job was to spend it half and half with the local bottler. Well, we had a catalog of things we could use, as marketing materials. The only thing I could find were pencils. We had Coke pencils and rulers. And so, but the school kids loved them, And so you go out and they just mob you to get these pencils and these rulers. But those are some funny.
And you chose. Why'd you choose those, Mark? If you had your choice.
Well, they turned me over to Don Keogh, who was head of the Americas groups, North and South America, and Don was a terrific guy at that point, and so he was going to take me under his wing, And my boss, the president of Coca-Cola, was retiring, and so they were kind of handing me off to Don. And Don said, okay, well, here's what we can do. We can let you go to the Caribbean, work out of San Juan on these little islands, and do that for a year, and then we'll move you to Argentina, to Buenos Aires. And you can go down there for who knows how long. Kind of launch your career out of that. So I knew what it meant. It meant, leaving the boardroom and going and really starting a career, but with some mentoring and some umbilical cord back to the U.S.
Right.
Through these other guys. So it was a different deal. Now, okay, other people stayed as staff people right up there at the top and right next door and all that kind of stuff, And I thought, well, no, I like working my way up from the bottom. I like that idea. And I didn't realize that, hey, you could make a whole lot of money if you just stayed there as a staff guy next door too. That was easy too. I'm glad I did the route that I did. Mm-hmm. And there was another guy, another executive who was a mentor of mine. His name was Bob Broadwater. Bob had been a prisoner of the Japanese in World War II. He had been a survivor of the Bataan Death March. So he spoke Japanese at the end of World War II. Coke hired him in Japan. And then he was in Peru, and then he was in several other countries. He negotiated deals for Coke to get back into Russia. And Bob was a great friend to me, and older guy. And he's the one who said to me, you need to go to another country right now while you're young, learn another language, do this before you're married, before you have kids, because it'll be hard for you to do that, later. And so I said, okay, that's what I'll do. So that's when I decided to do the thing in South America. And I'm really glad I did that. And it was a wonderful time. And those anecdotes go on and on forever. So that may have to be another.
I think that'll be part 3.
Part 3, but there's some Jimmy Carter and political things that came into play during that period. I was working in Puerto Rico and on a trip to Costa Rica when the hostage thing reached its big moment of trying to do the rescue.
Oh yeah.
In April, I was on a plane.
Desert Eagle.
Desert Eagle. Yeah. I was on a plane coming back from Costa Rica, landed in Miami, and picked up the newspaper and went, oh my gosh, I was trying to read the newspaper, as I was getting back to San Juan. Hard time. It was a hard time. And I got to visit the White House and stay overnight at the White House during the hostage crisis period too, in 1980, in September of that year. It was a hard time.
So September 79?
That was September of 80.
September of 80.
Okay. During that election campaign of 80.
Oh. So the 80 campaign, you were on the outside looking in.
I was in Puerto Rico.
That.
I was living in San Juan. I was still living in San Juan. I moved to Argentina in 81.
I assume you just followed it from newspapers?
From the newspapers and
correspondence.
Correspondence and that kind of thing, in and out. And then was there. He, at the end of the campaign, he came back to Plains. Jimmy came back to Plains after the inauguration. And remember, they released the hostages.
Right, it's the last slap in the face.
He went and met them at Frankfurt at the airport. I don't know if you remember that. He flew
Frankfurt on Main.
Frankfurt on Main. He came to the Caribbean. It was on a vacation then, almost immediately, with Rosalind, to St. John's. And that was another one of my islands. And so I went out to see him, and went out there to see him. And he'd been snorkeling that day. And that was also the day before that was the day that those hostages, they brought them to Washington. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that? And they had buses and they had yellow ribbons all along the route. It was that whole welcoming them back, to the U.S. and all that parade. Well, he missed all that. He was down there. And so I told him about it, I said this was a really emotional time, for everybody. And of course, he was decompressing from the loss of the election and all that. But that was that month.
How did he respond? Do you remember?
Well, he kind of smiled, and he said, well, did everybody seem happy? And I said, yeah. The hostages were happy. They seemed a little stunned, I guess. But there were just thousands of people along the route, that had yellow ribbons, and that was a big deal, that they got released. And the American people were very happy about that and very appreciative of that. And that was all that we talked about it, really.
Yeah.
And I've got some notes on it somewhere else. But that was, I went over to see him in St. John's. I took something to him. Can't remember what I took to him. I took him a book or something. I can't remember. Anyway, I was working with the bottler, who was the bottler in the Virgin Islands, was a funny guy named Charles Nicholson. And Charles and I went over to see him, and then came back. But anyway, so that was when that was in 1980 and 81. That was January of 81.
Yeah.
Then I left to go to Argentina in February of 81.
And you were there for a year?
I was in Argentina for about a year and a half. And that was up through the Falklands War, the Falklands Malvinas War.
Yeah, the Malvinas.
I was there during that. I saw 5 presidents of Argentina in 12 months. Before I went, I asked a guy who was with Coke, I said, so what is Buenos Aires like?
Yeah, I was about to say, what's the political prep like for,
Well, first I had to get
Peronistas and
all of that. And they were still doing, the kidnappings were still going on when I got there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, well, what's it like? And he lived there. He said, you'll never live better. And I said, really? He said, you'll never live better. Okay. I got there. I got paid in pesos. The inflation rate was 3,000%. I got a raise every 90 days. Because of that, I got a raise every 90 days. I was on the expatriate kind of package of tax incentives, paying for housing, all kinds of other things. So as a young guy, I was making a lot of money. I mean, I was making the equivalent of about $130,000 a year in 1980, 81, and yet housing was covered.
Right. What were your expenses?
They gave me a car. I didn't have any expenses.
Didn't have to buy your Coca-Cola.
No, I had to buy food, and food was the cheapest thing you got in Argentina.
Yeah.
Even though the inflation was through the roof. And so I saw 5 presidents of Argentina, and went through all the crazy Falkland stuff and the war and all that crazy stuff. And that guy was still right. It's still one of the best places you'll ever live.
Were you based out of Buenos Aires?
Yeah. And then I went from those really tiny little Caribbean rural markets that I did not share details of, which some are really funny and interesting, fascinating stuff, and hilarious, to Argentina. This was an urban market of 16 million people in Buenos Aires,
right?
One of the biggest cities in the world, and I'm in charge of regions way out in these suburbs that went on forever, for miles, and I was in charge of some of these suburbs out there as a marketing guy. And so, first thing I had to do was go out and ride on the trucks, because I wanted to get my language up to speed. My language was okay. I'd come out of this intensive Berlitz thing before I went to Puerto Rico, but everybody in Puerto Rico is speaking English.
Right.
But then you get thrown into Argentina, and wow, I mean, it's total immersion. And so for 6 months, I was riding on these Coke trucks, being the sales guy. So you got a driver, a helper, helping load the stuff, and the sales guy. I'm the sales guy. And so you're getting out there at 4 o'clock in the morning, riding these routes, knocking on all these little doors and little.
Guess you weren't staying up as late as you had.
Well, I was also married. I got married during that.
Oh, there you go.
So my wife was in there, and she was teaching school at one of the American schools out there. And so, but here I was out there on those trucks at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, and selling the goods. Little tiny stores, little bars, dirt streets in some cases, just crazy stuff. And having to learn that language from the sales point of view, wow, and they would argue with you,
Right. In the U.S., price, okay.
No.
Not
and they're going to banter with you. And you also had a deal of the day. Here's the deal of the day. And the deal of the day is, and back then you're selling Coke, but it's in those returnable bottles.
Right.
Well, these are also liter returnable, big bottles, like this big around. And so the deal,
which are popular again and have to be imported
exactly,
from your old
Argentina,
neighbors.
yeah. And so, you had these certain things. And so what you would do, the normal deal is that you were selling them the liquid,
Yeah,
right? Because they would have the bottles.
right. The bottles were already there.
And so you were selling them the liquid. Okay, but if you want to do a real deal, the deal was, well, we'll sell you 3 bottles of the liquid for for the price of, we'll sell you 2 bottles. We'll sell you 3 with the glass for just the liquid price. So we're giving you the extra glass, because you might need to restock your glass.
Right, yeah, it breaks.
We're just trying to
People
build
don't return, yeah.
market share. And so, no. Pepsi gives me a better deal than that. Wow, and all this is going on in Spanish, and you're going, oh. And sometimes they were very nice to you.
And you're thinking, they didn't teach me this at the language school.
And they're running out and of course the truck drivers are laughing and helping you out. They're also teaching you all the nasty language and all the funny stuff.
Right.
And Argentinians are very funny. They were funny people anyway. And so they loved it when I was able to then talk in some of those phrases. So I loved that.
Now, did you run into any we'll call them German expatriate communities?
There were people from all kinds of countries there all the time, and so the Germans that were the really bad guy Germans, they did not hang around in Wayne City. They went off to small communities, much further away, and you would hear about them in these other places. And the guy who was Mingala and these other guys that they thought they found.
Yeah, Eichmann.
Those were Eichmann. Those guys were in southern Brazil and northern Argentina, more rural type places.
Right.
They went to hide out. But most of Argentina, 60% of the population is Italian descent.
Well,
anyway.
Pope Francis.
Yeah, exactly.
Bergoglio.
Exactly. And I love hearing that guy talk because he talks in that Argentine kind of accent. But yeah, so they speak Spanish with an Italian rhythm.
Okay.
And
okay.
So, and with Italian accents.
I can get behind that.
And so they say, la calle Marietta, it's the street, the widest street in the city.
Stress on stress.
That kind of thing, and stretch it out. And they'll do and then the hand gestures are like that too. Un boludo, it's un quilombo. It means it's a disaster, and something. They have all these little Argentine phrases that are hilarious. And so anyway, it was fun, and I'm proud that I learned my language skills there.
Yeah.
But then I learned that I could speak in 2 or 3 different dialects. There are 2 or 3 different dialects in Argentina, but then I figured out, well, okay, Peru, Colombia, Venezuela, those are actually easier. You don't do the same rhythms. You pronounce everything out. Mm-hmm. Everything's pretty clear. The verb tenses are different in Argentina too. They use the old vos and vosotros.
Vosotros, yeah.
And vos tenés.
Which nobody teaches in the U.S.
Anyway.
Nobody.
No,
nobody
in the U.S.
uses
don't
that.
worry about that.
Nobody uses
that anymore. Well, of course they use it in Argentina. So
parts of Spain.
Maradona, the great soccer star, he was 19 years old when I got there. Came in the office, because he was their kind of spokesperson at 19.
Just for the record, we'll remind future generations that he handed that ball into the goal in '86. So
there you go.
If there was VAR,
there you go.
The English would have another star on their kit. Neither here nor there.
Neither here nor there. Well, of course, in Argentina, you're either a River Plate or the Boca. One of those 2 teams. You're one of those are very big rivals. Boca is who Maradona played for, the blue and the white, and the red and the white is River Plate. And so there was great arguments between those groups,
right?
Rivalries.
And then, of course, they played Brazil and friendlies.
And there were some other teams in Argentina.
Sure.
Those were the 2 big ones. Yeah, big teams. So anyway, that was a lot of fun. They were crazy times, and I saw I saw the end of the kidnappings. There were kidnappings still going on when I got there. And they would, if you saw a Ford Falcon, old Ford Falcon that was great. I mean, they made them down there in Argentina, so they weren't old. They were old to us, looking style to us, but they were new to them. They even had them outfitted in leather seats, But if they were kind of gray looking, look out. They were usually police, secret police. And if they'd take the tag and jab the tag up under the bumper a little bit, so you could only read part of the tag. And that was so you couldn't get the tag number. Watch out for those guys. Those are the guys doing the kidnappings.
So those they pull up, snatch it, throw
snatch
you in,
off the street, gone. and we still saw a few of those at the end. Now, there were a whole lot of those right before I got there, before '82, but '82 was kind of the end. '81, it was still going on, some of that.
Yeah.
And then the economy got really bad. Saw these 5 presidents of Argentina. Then that's when the last of those 5 military presidents invaded the Falklands, invaded the Malvinas to get everybody's mind off of that.
Right. Margaret Thatcher.
And I was in the middle of one of those things, demonstrations, and I got caught in the middle of it with the tear gas and the whole thing. And by the Casa Rosada, which is where the mothers, mothers of the Plaza de Mayo, the mothers of the ones who'd been kidnapped, and the grandmothers.
Right.
So saw a lot of that too. But it was a fascinating time. It was a fascinating time, and the whole exchange rates and the money. Oh my gosh, you talk about crazy.
Right.
Because there was one street where all the exchange is going on.
Right.
Every payday, you had to make a decision. Am I going to buy dollars today, or am I going to put it into a savings account?
A savings account.
A savings account that might earn 30% in 30 days.
And now pesos.
In pesos.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
But 30% isn't
30%. Yes. But you had to figure out, is the dollar going to is the peso going to devalue by more than 30% in that 30-day period?
Yeah.
Because the devaluations were going on. At
right.
the same
You
time.
have the inflation and devalue.
Yeah. So everybody, right down to the lowest level clerk in the company, became international monetary experts. Every payday.
Through necessity.
Every payday. Right. And we're watching. And so every payday, 3 days before you got paid, you'd make a decision. Am I going to buy dollars, or am I going to put it in a savings account?
How would you decide? What were it's how McDonald's has this formula for when the McRib makes sense.
Well, you'd look at the exchange rate, or you'd look at the dollar at the exchange thing and say, well, is there going to be something weird that the central bank's going to do during this 30 days?
Okay.
To devalue the peso. And we know the interest rate's running at 30% or 35, anywhere from 25 to 35% in a month.
Right.
Okay, so that was the key. Then you go down the street. Mm-hmm. Well, at every street, not every street. There's one street. Every other storefront is an exchange house, or a place where you can put money into the savings accounts. Okay, and they got little electronic signs telling you what the exchange rate is. It's changing every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. So you take a number to get weighted on.
So it could change.
Exactly. So you take a number, and while you're waiting, and you're maybe the 5th or 6th or 7th person in line, it could change a lot. So you take 2 people, and you say, go down the street, okay, this looks pretty good. I'm going to take a number here. All right. And I'm going to stand right here. You go down the street. The next guy runs down the street and says, okay, I got a better rate. He takes a number, you throw this one away, and you go down the next
It's
street.
an art, not a science.
Oh, my God. And so you kept doing this leapfrog thing until you got the one you wanted. And then, there you go. And you figured it out. And it's crazy. And so then you had just wads of cash all the time. You had wads of cash, whether it was pesos or dollars. You didn't have anywhere to put it. And you get a checking account. Nobody had a checking account because you might put your money in a bank, and the bank might not be there.
Right. This isn't the Citizens and Southern Bank in Atlanta.
It might be a run on a bank every 30 days. In some bank. So I'm just saying. So you had wads of cash. I would come back, and you learned what a money belt was. It's where it's got a zipper in the back of the belt, and you wad up $100 bills, and you stuff them inside this little belt, and you'd wear those through customs. I mean, that's stuff you did, and you tried to bring money back in.
Not just for drug dealers.
No. And I'd come back to Atlanta for meetings or something, and I'd go down to Muse's, the men's store downtown. I'm going to buy a new suit. Okay, everybody in Argentina's wearing suits. Okay, not in the Caribbean, but in Argentina, everybody's dressed nice.
Right, yeah.
So I go in to buy a suit. Well, I'd take a stack of $100 bills in there to buy a suit because I didn't have anything else. I didn't have a credit card. I didn't have any checking account. I didn't have anything.
You didn't have the Bank America card from the Citizens?
I look like a drug dealer. I look like a drug dealer.
Walking around money.
I was pulling out $200, $300, $400 for a suit, that kind of stuff. I mean, it was
well, the early '80s. I remember when I would teach, the freshman survey class and trying to explain the economic situation of the '70s and early '80s. With the Volcker shock. Right. Because we have hyperinflation in the '70s.
Sure.
People talk about inflation today. Inflation today is nothing. Doesn't touch the '70s. And to break inflation, you raise interest rates.
Yeah.
So I would show them a clip from Ghostbusters, which is filmed in 83, 84, came out in 84. And there's a scene with Rick Moranis, and he's an accountant.
Yeah.
And he's hosting this party
Right.
at his apartment, but he only invites clients so he can use it as a write-off. And he's telling everybody's personal information about what they have, their taxes and their mortgage situation.
Right.
And he introduces this couple, and he says, they've got $30,000 left on their mortgage at 13% interest, so they're not doing bad. And I was like, did you hear this? A 13% mortgage.
I know, man. Isn't that crazy?
I was like, if somebody offers you a 13% mortgage, you run away.
No kidding.
But that was the time, and of course the global economy has a cold, and Argentina is getting the fever.
Oh man,
down there.
Yeah, and and of course Chile was doing better than Argentina. They were always doing better economically. Argentina, even now, they're trying to fix some of these things. Well,
their military junta was a little
different.
Different.
Yeah. Well, the macho Argentines, have a whole different way of doing business and doing things interpersonally, and they even still laugh about. But everything's macho, and so.
Sort of a caudillo culture.
It's beyond. If you're it's very status based too, so that the English came to Argentina in the late 1800s to build railroads. Well, and they stayed, and as they stayed, they had their clubs, whatever they were, different kind of country clubs and other kinds of things. They had tea at 4:00, and so you had these Italians who then started coming to Argentina in 1900. People who left Italy. They would make a decision: am I going to New York or am I going to Buenos Aires? And they went in each direction.
Yeah.
And so that's how Argentines ended up being Italian. But they got down there, those poor Italians, and they were trying to emulate these high-class British, drinking tea at 4:00, and it got really wacky.
Yeah.
And so the Argentines got real strange about their social status stuff. When you cross the street in Argentina, and there's a mud puddle, this is a joke, but sometimes not. You didn't jump over the mud puddle. Okay. You walk through the mud puddle, because otherwise somebody might think that's your only pair of shoes. And you don't want to.
There's probably a healthy grain of truth to that.
Isn't that crazy? And everybody's dressed up nicely, and everywhere. Even the Americans.
Right, everybody looks like a South American soccer coach.
Yeah, and they're all fashion. Well, and the women, this is 6 months ahead of the fashion because of the climate. They're 6 months ahead of the fashions in the rest of the world anyway. And so they take that straight from Paris straight to Argentina. I mean, the women have very nice clothing.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. They're very high style down there, and they're proud of it. And so, it's funky stuff. But yeah, and the other one was they go to the beach in the summer, okay? And everybody goes to the beach in the summer, and they all have a summer place, And those who can't afford it, though, they put all the shutters down in their house and sneak out the back door every day to go to work because they want people to think they're at the beach. That is a true. I can't make that up.
Well,
it's Mar del Plata is where they go for the beach. Isn't that wacky? But it's just this thing, But it's a fabulous place. It's still got the biggest opera house in the world is there. The art community, the parks are spectacular. The food is fantastic. The food is cheap because the meat and the
the cattle industry,
everything's there. The cattle industry is so cheap, and so it's fabulous. The food is fantastic.
Well, they just elected this is a very wide-ranging conversation we're having, but they just elected a real a new president, I forget what his name, but
Bolsonaro.
Yeah, he's a sort of I don't want anarcho-libertarian.
And they call him
something.
I think it's because of his bushy eyebrows. Yep. They call him the eyebrows or something. They have all these jokes in Argentina about stuff like that.
Yeah, he's got kind of a wild-eyed look about him.
Yeah.
But
well, and here's part of their problem.
We'll see.
Part of their problem in Argentina is that they've nationalized or had, and they've gotten out of this a lot. Everything, telephone companies, electric companies, the airlines, transportation systems, everything is nationalized. Well, that means all those people are on the federal payroll. Okay, so if the markets aren't efficient and those businesses aren't efficient, they're losing money. Well, guess who's making that up? It's coming out of your taxes. It's coming out of somewhere. And so that's why the country was always in the tank. And inflation's running wild. And you couldn't fire these people because they're all in government. Okay, this guy's facing exactly the same issues. And he said he wants to peg everything to the dollar now and, do away with the peso. That's great, but you still got all these other issues. So they got a lot of problems to still solve. But it is still a fabulous, unusual country.
Well,
So,
I think we've probably run our course for today.
Yes, probably have.
But, we'll pick up when you head back to Atlanta and you head back to Cambridge, Massachusetts.
That's right, yeah. And the day I left, the week that we left in the middle of the war, is part of the fun part of the story, and maybe we'll pick it up.
Right, 82.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Jim.
Sure.
Part 2. Stay tuned for part 3. We'll make sure it's not 2 years later. We'll do one sooner.
Well, yeah,
than
I've got to
that.
do it when my memory still survives all these.
Well, I think you're doing all right so far.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
thank you very much, Jim, and stay tuned.
Thank you.